Chapter 1862. Since the old man apologized, Tao Qing naturally wouldn't be so unforgiving. He simply nodded. Someone else said, "But then again, what's the origin of the three-world island? They're so powerful. Back then, the Battle of Baiwe shocked the Wanxiang Sea. Now they even have the upper hand against Zixuan." Everyone called the three-world island the three-world island. However, no one knew which galaxy the cultivators of the three-world island came from. A cultivator looked at Tao Cheng. "Taoist Tao Cheng, you seem to be quite familiar with the three-world island. Do you know anything?" Tao Cheng placed his hands behind his back and said calmly, "Why do you care about their origin? Just remember one thing. The cultivators of the three-world island aren't unreasonable. Although they haven't been in the Wanxiang Sea for long, they've never taken the initiative to have any conflicts with any forces. For example, when they attacked Baiwe, it was because Baiwe was ordered by someone to attack the cultivators of the three-world island in private. That's why the three-world island attacked Baiwe. Therefore, whether it's back then or today, the way the three-world island does things is that they won't attack unless they're attacked first." At this point, Tao Qing changed the topic and chuckled. "It's said that there's a female demon from the six-tailed fox clan in Zixuan. She's so beautiful that she can make people fall head over heels for her. Whose concubine is she now?" No one dared to answer. Some things were clear in their hearts, but it wasn't good to say it out loud. Back then, who was the one who secretly ordered Bai Yu to secretly attack the cultivators of the three-world island? Perhaps no one knew at first, but when Lu Yi was chasing after Yu Huan, there was actually Rizhao who came to uphold justice. This was very ridiculous. As for the female demon from the six-tailed fox clan, she seemed to be directly related to Guardian Rizhao. Baiwe first, then Zixuan. When all these pieces of information were connected, it was undoubtedly very thought-provoking. A cultivator changed the topic. "In Taoist Tao Cheng's opinion, how will today's battle develop?" Tao Cheng sneered. "I'm not in the battle. I'm just watching like everyone else. How would I know how the battle will develop? I'll just watch." Although he said that, he looked in the direction of Zixuan Island with some worry. Lionheart had already killed his way back. After Lu Yi killed Hu Guang, he flashed and hid in a large hall on Purple Jade Island. No one knew what he was doing. One had to admit that the strength displayed by Lu Yi was very strong. But the Purple Jade Island's monster cultivators were not afraid of death. Everything happened so quickly that most of the monster cultivators on Purple Jade Island did not have time to react. Now that they did, they all rushed towards Lu Yi. Xing Su was indeed weaker than Yu Yao, but if Lu Yi didn't escape as soon as possible, he wouldn't be able to do much on his own. No matter how strong he was, could he single-handedly exterminate all the Yao cultivators on Purple Jade Island? If he were Lu Yi, he would have definitely fled before Lionheart arrived. He had reaped a great harvest from this battle, and to Lu Yi, he had profited immensely. He had made a name for the three-world island, and there was no need for him to take such a risk. He believed that from now on, no one would dare to provoke the three-world island. But Lu Yi refused to leave. At the same time, Lu Yi charged into the hall and swiftly killed a few constellation demon clans. Then, with a flip of his palm, a deep-sea snail appeared in his hand. He didn't hesitate, and immediately put the snail to his mouth and blew it. Changxing thought he was alone, but in reality, he was never alone. He had the entire three-world island behind him. It was just that the time hadn't come yet. So three-world island's monster cultivators hadn't made a move. Now the time had come. Purple Jade Island's great protective array had collapsed. The battle against Baiyu could not be replayed in Zixian, because the protective array of Zixian was too strong. Even though Lu Yi had disguised himself as Ho Fei with the precious blood clone to sneak in, he had only killed Red Elephant, and had not brought anyone with him in the small flower realm. Even if he had, he wouldn't have been able to break the great protective array in a short time. The only result would have been being caught like a turtle in a jar. There was no need to worry about that now. At this time, in the three-world islands monster cultivators encampment area, all the three-world islands monster cultivators who had received Lu Yi's message in advance had gathered here. Lu Yi had left a mark on this location, with the blue sea snail in advance. Recently, he had been targeting Purple Jade Island, so he had naturally prepared some things in advance. The door opened by the Blue Sea Snail didn't lead to the merfolk's territory. He had tried this in his early years after obtaining the Blue Sea Snail. As long as he left a specific mark on a certain location in advance, the door would appear at the mark after blowing the Blue Sea Snail. This mark could be actively removed. If it wasn't removed, it would remain for a period of time before dissipating. Lu Yi had always felt that this thing could be used as a surprise tactic in war. Unfortunately, he hadn't had a good opportunity to use it. This time, the opportunity was very good. When the door opened, Ma Shangxi was the first to rush in, followed by Luan Xiaoa, Yen Miao, and He Baichuan. It could be said that Yu Yao's combat strength on the surface of the three-world island was all gone. Then, a large number of Xing Su cultivators passed through the door in an orderly and extremely fast manner. The three-world island's monster cultivators descended on Purple Jade. Back when the three-world island was poor, Lu Yi had dared to lead all the cultivators to attack Baiyue, leaving the entire three-world island behind. Although the three-world island was developing well, he still had no scruples. On the three-world island's side, there were no Xing Su cultivators left behind to maintain order in the trade zone. If they won this battle, they would be able to crush Purple Jade Island's might. In the future, no one would dare to cause trouble in the three-world island. If they lost, then naturally, there would be nothing left to talk about. Purple Jade Island. Lionheart's speed was very fast. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately rushed back to help. However, Lu Yi was even faster. He first killed Bao Yuyu, then Hu Guang. Lionheart was so angry that the corners of his eyes were about to burst. He finally killed his way back to Purple Jade Island. With a furious roar, he charged toward the hall that Lu Yi had entered. His killing intent was so condensed that it was almost tangible. He swore to kill Lu Yi here. Then, all the cultivators in the area who were watching the battle saw an unbelievable scene. Lionheart charged fiercely into the hall, but after only one breath, he was sent flying out in an extremely sorry state. His huge, burly body was like a sandbag. His body was in midair, and the chi and blood around him were showing signs of dissipating. Following closely behind Lionheart were several figures, each with a fearful aura. The person in the lead was none other than Lu Yi of the three-world island. "What's going on?" Cries of surprise rang out from all directions. They couldn't understand what they were seeing. Lu Yi had charged in alone, but now several people had rushed out together. Moreover, those people weren't ordinary cultivators. They were clearly Yu Yao, and they looked quite familiar. Isn't that the first island master of the three-world island, Luan Xiaoa? Some cultivators recognized Luan Xiaoa. As the first island master of the three-world island, Luan Xiaoa would often appear in public. Under Tang Jun's guidance, she had befriended Yu Yao from various factions. Naturally, many cultivators recognized her. However, what puzzled them was why Luan Xiaoa had appeared in Purple Jade, and why she had charged out from that hall. "That's Ma Shangxi." Someone else recognized Ma Shangxi. "And Miao Yan. That bastard He Baichuan is here too." Including Lu Yi. This meant that all 5 Yu Yao who were officially registered in the three-world island were gathered here. Aside from Lu Yi, the other 4 were all late-stage Yu Yao. Shock, disbelief, confusion, all sorts of emotions surged in the hearts of the cultivators. Soon, everyone's expressions changed. They finally understood what Lionheart had encountered. The first island master of Purple Jade had charged into the hall aggressively, but in the end, he had been ambushed by the 5 Yu Yao of the three-world island. How could he have ended up well? Lionheart was indeed powerful, but he was still a Yu Yao, not Sunshine. It was like a naughty child in the countryside digging out a snake's hole. He thought there was only one small snake in the hole, but 5 ferocious tigers suddenly appeared. How could the word tragic not be enough? However, Lionheart was truly powerful. This was evident from his current state, as there were no obvious wounds on his body. In other words, the 5 Yu Yaos of the three-world island hadn't been able to do anything to him in the exchange just now. Lionheart was retreating, and the corners of his eyes were about to explode. However, even more Purple Jade demonic cultivators were charging forward. The entire Purple Jade Island was in an uproar. Thousands of demonic cultivators came from different directions and gathered here. The huge spiritual island was filled with a feeling of unity against a common enemy. Lionheart's heart sank. The spectating cultivators couldn't figure out how the Yu Yao of the Three-World Island had appeared on Purple Jade Island. However, after he charged into the hall, he saw it clearly. There was a door in the middle of the hall. From the door, one figure after another appeared. Lionheart didn't even need to think to know that the door was connected to the Three-World Island. He couldn't figure out how Lu Yi had managed to open such a door in such a short period of time. He only knew that Purple Jade was in big trouble this time. If it was just Lu Yi alone, he wouldn't be too worried. No matter how strong a single person was, there was still a limit to what they could do. Zixian's Yu Yao had indeed died, and he was the only one left. However, Zixian had 5,000 constellations. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they could still kill Lu Yi. However, if the cultivators of the Three-World Island attacked together, he couldn't predict how the situation would turn out. After a short consideration, Lionheart came to a decision. He immediately roared, "Destroy the hall! Destroy the door!" He couldn't allow more Three-World Island cultivators to descend on Purple Jade. "What are you shouting for?" Ma Shangxi shouted angrily. The sea of blood suddenly spread out, trying to envelop Lionheart. Lionheart was the backbone of Purple Jade. As long as he was killed, no matter how many Purple Jade Yao cultivators there were, they would be nothing but a pile of loose sand. However, Lionheart wasn't an ordinary Yu Yao. Although he had been caught off guard, he was still strong. Faced with Ma Shangxi's sea of blood, he quickly dodged. Before he could catch his breath, his expression turned cold. When he looked up, Lu Yi was already charging at him with his saber. End of chapter. Chapter 1863. Lionheart's expression was solemn. He didn't dare to let his guard down. He was still very wary of Lu Yi. Even if he were to attack personally, he wouldn't be able to kill Bao Yuyu and Hu Guang in such a short time. But Lu Yi had done it. Regardless of his cultivation level, his methods were extremely frightening. He was definitely an opponent worthy of Lionheart's full strength. Suddenly a great battle broke out. The two figures flew back and forth, fist shadows and saber lights wreaking havoc. In terms of size, Lu Yi was only the size of Lionheart's arm. But in terms of momentum and strength, the tiny Lu Yi seemed to be a notch higher. Ma Shangxi also controlled the sea of blood to surge and boil at the side, constantly looking for an opportunity to envelop Lionheart. This made Lionheart extremely frustrated. Almost at the same time that Lu Yi and his servant faced off against Lionheart, a great battle broke out in the main hall where the door was. Countless demon constellations rushed over and attacked the main hall. Because Lionheart had given them the order to destroy the main hall, they didn't need to know the reason to carry out his orders. Wan Xiaoa, Yin Miao, and He Baichuan's three Yu Yao figures leaped forward. Everywhere they passed, blood-red light bloomed. Although the Purple Jade Demon cultivators used the twin Qi-linked branches formation disc to form a formation, even if all of them were late-stage constellations, the strength they could unleash was barely equal to that of a newly ascended Yu Yao. The three Yu Yaos of the Three-World Island were all late-stage cultivators, especially Luan Xiaoa and Yin Miao. They had the potential to break through to the Sunshine Realm. Even if the Purple Jade Demon cultivators formed a formation, how could they be a match for them? But with just the three of them, it was obvious that they couldn't protect the main hall. While they were killing the Purple Jade Demon cultivators, more Purple Jade Demon cultivators attacked the main hall. From within the main hall, cultivators from the Three-World Island continuously formed formations and charged out to meet the enemy cultivators. The spectating cultivators were already dumbfounded. What they were seeing had already surpassed their understanding. Lu Yi had entered the main hall alone. It was one thing for 5 Yu Yaos to charge out together. But now, even more constellations were charging out? And those constellations that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere were obviously cultivators from the Three-World Island. If they didn't know that the spiritual island in front of them belonged to Purple Jade, they would have thought that this was the headquarters of the Three-World Island. The main hall was the Array Foundation Hall. It was incomparably sturdy, which was why it was able to withstand the attacks from all directions without collapsing. But in the end, the main hall was still blasted apart. It was true that the Array Foundation Hall was protected by an array formation, and the constellations of the three-world island had activated the array formation as soon as they arrived through the portal. But how could it withstand the frenzied attacks of so many purple jade Yao cultivators? After the main hall was destroyed, the door was so eye-catching among the broken walls. The spectating cultivators finally understood where the three-world islands cultivators had come from. This door was clearly the key to their success. Someone's eyes lit up as he said, "When the three-world island attacked Baiyu, many fellow Taoists did an investigation after the battle. Some fellow Taoists also asked the surviving cultivators of Baiyu about the specific situation on that day. Some things were clarified, but there was one thing that remained a mystery." Another person added, "That's right. It was said that during that battle, the three-world islands cultivators appeared out of thin air inside Baiyu. They broke through several array foundations, causing Baiyu's defensive array formation to weaken greatly. That was why it was forcefully broken through. All this time, no one knew how the three-world islands cultivators appeared inside Baiyu. It seems like this is the reason. That Lu Yi clearly had a method to open a door to the three-world island from another spiritual island, just like what they saw today. The mystery of Baiyu back then had been clarified. But wasn't Lu Yi's speed too fast? From the time he entered the main hall to the time Lionheart chased after him, less than 10 breaths had passed. What kind of method was this? Before they had time to think, Zixian's side changed again. When the main hall was broken through, and the door was revealed, the three-world islands cultivators were in a bad situation. Because it was still a short time, the number of three-world islands cultivators who had descended was not many. Although the three Yu Yao charged into the formation to kill the enemies, relieving a great deal of pressure, there were still many attacks aimed at the main hall. If they were not stopped, not to mention whether the door could hold on. Even if it could, the three-world islands cultivators who walked out of the door would be in for a bad time. The moment the cultivators passed through the door was undoubtedly the moment when they were at their weakest. Fortunately, Luan Xiaoa and the others had already prepared for this situation. Beside the door, 7 late-stage Constellation Realm cultivators stood. Their position seemed casual, but in reality, there was something mysterious about them. The 7 of them were all burly and full of vitality. They were all body cultivators, especially the one in the middle. He was the tallest and most burly of them all. His bare chest made him look simple and honest. He held a chi-linking formation disc in his hand and suddenly roared. In an instant, the chi dynamics of the 7 body cultivators were connected. Their chi and blood mingled, and there were faint roars of beasts. A huge black tortoise formation was formed. The twin chi and branch formation disc had been popular on the myriad forms C for so many years. Everyone was already familiar with some of the more common formations. The black tortoise formation was undoubtedly the most common one. 5 people were enough to form the formation, and 7 was the best. When the formation was formed, it would gain the power of the black tortoise and possess extremely strong defensive capabilities. However, this black tortoise formation that suddenly appeared seemed to be a little different from what everyone knew. The black tortoise formation formed by the black tortoise formation was too lifelike. Even the veins on its back could be seen clearly. The black tortoise formation already possessed very strong defensive capabilities. No one could say for sure how strong this black tortoise formation, that looked different from the rest, was. However, they soon received confirmation of their suspicions. Because countless attacks landed on the back of the black tortoise formation, they were unable to break through the formation immediately. The door under the protection of the formation remained motionless. "This formation is so powerful," someone exclaimed. The defensive capabilities of the black tortoise formation far exceeded their understanding. "Who's at the eye of the formation?" someone asked. Although the strength of the formation was closely related to all the cultivators who formed it, the one who was at the eye of the formation was undoubtedly the one who was at the eye of the formation. The person who spoke clearly realized that the difference in the black tortoise formation had a lot to do with the cultivator at the eye of the formation. "This person is called Giant Armor." He's one of the most powerful constellations in the three-world island. Elder Yu Yao, who had been at odds with Tao Wu, suddenly spoke up. Does everyone still remember the scene when the Great Baiwa defensive formation was broken? Someone revealed a look of reminiscence. It seems that the one who broke the Great Baiwa defensive formation was also a black tortoise formation. Even though many years had passed since that shocking scene, those who had witnessed it with their own eyes were still overwhelmed with emotion when they recalled it. That was because they knew that the black tortoise formation was used for defensive purposes. Who would have thought that this formation could unleash such a terrifying attack? Elder Yu Yao said, "That's right. The black tortoise formation that year was controlled by this giant armor. With the assistance of several Yu Yao from the three-world island, it was able to unleash such an earth-shattering attack." Tao Wu suddenly turned his head to look at him. "Fellow Taoist, you seem to know quite a bit about the three-world island." Elder Yu Yao chuckled. "The three-world island's rapid rise is a model for all of us. Naturally, we should learn more about it and imitate it." Tao Wu stared at him for a moment longer, before turning his head away. It was at this moment that someone suddenly exclaimed, "Oh no, Lionheart's in trouble." Tao Wu hurriedly looked towards Lionheart's battlefield, and saw that Lionheart and Lu Yi were locked in a fierce battle. Their cultivations were clearly one minor realm apart, but Lu Yi actually had the absolute upper hand. Lionheart was actually suppressed to the point where he could only defend himself. This undoubtedly meant one thing. Lionheart was no match for Lu Yi in a one-on-one battle. Of course, this might also be due to Ma Shangxi's deterrence. That guy was controlling a sea of blood that floated up and down, sweeping towards Lionheart from time to time. Lionheart definitely had to be on guard. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that while the two sides were locked in a fierce battle, a figure was silently approaching Lionheart from behind. Tao Wu focused his vision and discovered that the figure was actually Lu Yi. He immediately understood that this was Lu Ye's clone. He finally recalled that Lu Ye's clone had lured Lionheart away, but when Lionheart returned, Lu Ye's clone was nowhere to be seen. He didn't expect that Lu Yi would return at this time. Moreover, judging from the clone's posture, it was obvious that he had used a concealment technique. Lionheart, who was locked in a fierce battle with Lu Yi, didn't notice this at all. Lionheart was probably in for a bad time. Tao Wu had personally witnessed the terrifying might of Lu Ye's clone's blood explosion technique. His junior brother Tiger had died to this technique. Suddenly, spiritual energy surged in the crowd. Tao Wu abruptly turned his head and stared at an unfamiliar Yu Yao. He blinked and suddenly understood what was happening. He immediately raised his fist and punched at Yu Yao. Yu Yao's cultivation wasn't high, only at the mid-stage. How could she dodge Tao Wu's sneak attack? The punch caused Yu Yao to spit out a mouthful of blood and stagger backward. Tao Wu, however, didn't give up. His magic power surged as he hammered at Yu Yao with both fists. "Fellow Taoist, why are you doing this?" The mid-stage Yu Yao shouted as he coughed up blood. "You're an eyesore to me." Tao Wu snorted coldly and chased after him. He threw a few more punches and blasted the cultivator to smithereens. Many of the surrounding cultivators felt their hearts skip a beat. Tao Wu looked around and said coldly, "If you want to watch a good show, then watch. Don't do anything that displeases me." The lunar mansions were confused, but the Yu Yao were well aware of the situation. Tao Wu seemed to have unreasonably killed a Yu Yao cultivator, but in reality, that guy had asked for it. That guy had actually sent a message to Lionheart just now. The sudden surge of spiritual energy was the most obvious evidence. Tao Wu and Lu Yi had a personal relationship. How could Tao Wu allow this person to send a message to Lionheart in front of Tao Wu? He directly killed him. On the other side, Lionheart received the warning, and finally sensed the talent tree clone behind him attacking. However, he didn't have a good way to deal with it, because Lu Yi and his servant had already exhausted all of his concentration. Left with no choice, he could only activate his power to protect his back. The talent tree clone kicked out, and the powerful force caused Lionheart to stagger. Lu Yi took advantage of the momentum to attack, forcing Lionheart to dodge to the side. Ma Shangxi had been waiting for a long time. Almost at the instant the talent tree clone kicked out, she had already spread the sea of blood in that direction. End of chapter. Chapter 1864. The blood waves surged, and Lionheart fell into the sea of blood, disappearing without a trace. From the looks of it, it was as if he had thrown himself into the sea of blood. I finally caught him. Ma Shangxi gritted his teeth, clearly very irritated. In the past, his blood sea technique had always been successful, but this time, if it weren't for Lu Ye's talent tree clone, it would have been difficult to capture Lionheart. This made him realize one thing. Some Yu Yao's strength was truly unreasonable. He himself was also a late-stage Yu Yao, but if he were to face Lionheart alone, he definitely wouldn't be a match for him. The sea of blood began to churn violently. Lionheart, who had fallen into it, knew that the situation was bad. How could he just sit there and wait for death? He immediately urged his strength to stir up the sea of blood. For a moment, Ma Shangxi felt like he couldn't suppress him. Fortunately, Lu Yi had already charged to Lionheart's side under his guidance, and slashed repeatedly with his long saber. In the sea of blood, Lu Ye's expression was cold and fierce. He had to admit that Lionheart was indeed the strongest Yu Yao he had ever encountered. None of the Yu Yao he had encountered in the past could compare to him. Lionheart's strength was not only reflected in his combat ability, but also in his inconceivable physique. Yao cultivators rarely used transcendent artifacts, and neither did the Blood Tribe. However, the Blood Tribe couldn't use transcendent artifacts because of the corrosive nature of their blood arts, which greatly conflicted with transcendent artifacts. However, Yao cultivators were different. The biggest reason why Yao cultivators didn't use transcendent artifacts was because they were confident in their physique. Many Yao cultivators, after taking human form, would often temper a part of their body so that they could unleash power comparable to transcendent artifacts, or even transcendent artifacts. Moreover, every Yao cultivator was naturally proficient in their own clan's demonic arts. It could be said that Yao cultivators were basically dual cultivators of body and magic. For example, when Lu Yi had killed that red elephant Yu Yao under Zixian's sneak attack, she had swung her long trunk before she died. The power of that blow was not inferior to that of a transcendent artifact. Lionheart didn't have any body parts that were specially tempered. He had refined his entire body into an existence comparable to a transcendent artifact. His long lifespan and countless years of immersion in Yu Yao's later stages gave him plenty of time to do this. His body had already been tempered to the extreme. Every punch and kick was a magical treasure-level attack. No matter who it was, they wouldn't have a good ending. Therefore, even though Lu Ye's Mountain Ascension Blade was incomparably sharp and reinforced by the Divine Edge Spirit inscriptions, it couldn't cause too much damage to Lionheart's body. In fact, it could only break through his skin. Lu Yi had originally planned to use his precious blood doppelgangers to kill Lionheart. However, Lionheart's physique was so strong that he had to give up on this plan. Since he only had one Pan Shan saber, it would be useless to have more precious blood doppelgangers. He even took back his talent tree doppelganger. Lu Yi couldn't help but recall the time when he fought against Hikari, who was a realm higher than him. When his own attack wasn't enough to break through the enemy's defense, his successful slash often didn't play much of a role. Unless he used the Great Pinwheel Mystic technique and slashed at the same spot countless times. But how could Lionheart give Lu Yi such a chance? Therefore, all Lu Yi could do was suppress Lionheart, but there was no way he could achieve any real results. However, things were different now. The powerful Purple Jade Island Lord had fallen into the Blood Sea. As long as Ma Shangxi could stabilize the situation, Lionheart would die sooner or later. As the Blood Sea rolled, Lionheart roared. Every time this happened, the Blood Sea would roll more violently. This kind of invisible sound attack was impossible for Ma Shangxi to avoid. Lu Ye's figure shuttled back and forth in the Blood Sea. Every time he slashed at Lionheart's body, the sound of metal clashing against metal could be heard. Lionheart was like a beast trapped in a cage. He had no room to display his unreasonable strength, because he couldn't even grasp the enemy's whereabouts. Under the repeated slashes, a real wound finally appeared on Lionheart's body. Ma Shangxi had been waiting for this moment. He immediately became excited, like a shark that had smelled fish, and immediately activated the blood tracing technique. Blood kept flowing out of the small wound. At first, there was only one wound, but as time passed, more and more wounds appeared. Lionheart's huge body became bloody. He sensed that something was wrong. With his powerful physique, he was confident that no one on Yu Yao's level could do anything to him. But today, he was shocked to discover that there really was someone in this world who could break through his powerful body. If that was all, it wouldn't be a big deal. Lu Yi had done this by repeatedly slashing at the same spot. With his physique, such wounds could heal in the blink of an eye. But in reality, he could clearly sense a strange power lingering around his wounds. The wounds that should have healed quickly showed no signs of improvement. Not only that, but there was also a mysterious power coming from the blood sea, guiding his blood to quickly flow out of his wounds. The secret killing technique that Lu Yi and his servant had developed together was beginning to show results. The special nature of the mountain plate saber and the blood tracing technique were a match made in heaven. The battle in the blood sea continued, but because of the blood sea's concealment, the spectating cultivators couldn't see what was happening inside. Disappointed, they could only look toward Purple Jade Island. In this short period of time, the situation on Purple Jade Island had changed greatly. The Black Tortoise Formation led by Giant Armor was still maintained, protecting the door. But now the pressure they had to endure was clearly not as great. This was because more and more Three-World Island cultivators were walking out of the door and quickly forming a formation. They occupied the four corners and resisted the oncoming attacks. Therefore, even though Purple Jade Island had the advantage in numbers, they couldn't achieve any results. In terms of strategy, one side was attacking, while the other side was defending. In comparison, the Three-World Island as the defending side had a great advantage. Moreover, the three late-stage Yu Yao cultivators from the Three-World Island were slaughtering as they pleased. No one could stop them. In the sky, the Purple Jade Island cultivators fell like dumplings into a pot. The spectating cultivators couldn't help but hold their breaths. This was because they realized one thing. Regardless of their positions, likes and dislikes, they were witnessing a historic moment. This was a battle that would go down in the annals of the Wanxiang Sea. For so many years, ever since the top forces moved into the Wanxiang Sea and occupied the top-grade spiritual islands, there had never been a case of a top-grade spiritual island being breached and having a change of ownership. Of course, the Peerless Island didn't count. Although it was a top-grade spiritual island, it wasn't occupied by the top forces. Today, however, they were about to witness it with their own eyes. The top forces of the Wanxiang Sea had occupied the top-grade spiritual islands for tens of thousands of years. The situation was finally about to be broken, and the ones who did this were cultivators from a top-grade spiritual island. The Purple Jade Island cultivators' strategy of attacking the door had completely failed. This was because no more Three-World Island cultivators had descended from the door. All the cultivators from the Three-World Island had gathered on the battlefield. The existence of the door no longer mattered. The cultivators from the Three-World Island, who had descended, used the broken formation foundation hall as the center, and quickly built a defense against the enemy cultivators, who were attacking from all directions. Giant Armor and the others retreated with blood all over their bodies. During the battle just now, the Black Tortoise Formation they formed had turned into a trustworthy defensive shield for their companions at the most crucial moment. However, even such a Black Tortoise Formation was broken by the Purple Jade cultivators in the end. The seven-body cultivators all vomited blood as they retreated. Medical cultivators were already waiting for them, and quickly took over their treatment. If Meng Jia hadn't summoned his conch and formed a defense when the Black Tortoise Formation was broken, there would have been casualties on the Three-World Islands side. On the Three-World Islands side, the strongest defense formed by the Lunar Mansions wasn't the Black Tortoise Formation, but Meng Jia's conch. That thing was the true treasure. Previously, it had played a huge role in the battle against Baiyu. Today it still played a huge role. Luan Xiaoa, Yan Miao, and He Baichuan, the three late-stage Moon Jade cultivators, shuttled back and forth among the enemy cultivators as if there was no one around. While they killed the enemy, they didn't forget to provide timely support to their lunar mansions. Wherever the pressure was great, They would go and kill for a while to relieve the pressure on their defense. As time passed, more and more Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators died in battle. Around the defensive perimeter formed by the three World Islands cultivators, there were countless broken bodies and broken limbs. Fresh blood gathered on the ground and formed a small river that flowed in all directions. Countless spectating cultivators gasped in amazement. Up until now, even if they were at a clear disadvantage, even if they didn't have any Moon Jade cultivators to help them, the Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators still maintained their unparalleled fighting spirit. Not a single Yao cultivator fled or retreated. Many times, even if they knew that they would die, they still charged forward without hesitation. This tragic scene could be seen almost everywhere on the battlefield. The spectating cultivators couldn't bear to see it, but at the same time, they were filled with admiration. As expected of the Purple Jade Island Yao cultivators, this tenacity and courage to fight without fear of death. Cultivators from ordinary factions can't compare at all. With so many cultivators in the realm, why should they worry about not being strong in the future? I'm afraid Purple Jade is finished. Now let's see if Lionheart can escape. Even if Lionheart escapes, it won't change the outcome. Purple Jade's defeat is a foregone conclusion. Fellow Taoists, have you noticed? Purple Jade has suffered heavy losses, but the Three World Island doesn't seem to have a single casualty. How could the others not notice this? Because the Three World Islands cultivators had always been on the defensive, and the three late-stage Moon Jade cultivators had reduced the pressure on them. Thus, up until now, although many had been injured, not a single one had died. In the battle against Baiwe, the Three World Island achieved a terrifying result of 0 casualties. Now that they're facing Purple Jade, they can't do the same, right? If that was really the case, it would be too terrifying. It would be fine if they were able to do this against Baiwe. But this was Purple Jade, a top-tier spiritual island occupied by a top-tier faction. It was on a completely different level from Baiwe. However, judging from the current situation, as long as the Three World Island fought steadily, it wouldn't be difficult for them to do this. The cultivators could almost foresee one thing. Today's battle would be talked about enthusiastically for years to come. Back when the Three World Island attacked Baiwe, the cultivators of the Myriad Domain had discussed it for several years. This time, it would definitely not be any worse. Almost everyone felt that the situation wouldn't change much. The only variable now was whether or not Lionheart could escape. However, at this moment, a cold shout suddenly rang out from within Purple Jade Island. Cultivators of the Three World Island, heed my command. Follow me and kill the enemy. When the order was given, the spectating cultivators were still stunned. The cultivators of the Three World Island, who had been on the defensive, quickly moved. In the blink of an eye, they abandoned their impenetrable defensive formation. Instead, the 2,000 cultivators split into 3 groups like 3 long dragons. Luan Xiaoa, Yin Miao, and He Baichuan, the 3 late-stage Moon Jade cultivators, took the initiative to come forward and take the lead. Faint dragon roars could be heard. The 3 long dragons formed by the cultivators of the Three World Island were like true flood dragons emerging from the sea. They charged in 3 different directions. End of chapter. Chapter 1865. What is the Three World Island doing? Seeing the changes in Z Jade's battle situation, the spectating cultivators were all confused. They were clearly shocked by the sudden change in the Three World Island strategy. According to the development of the situation just now, the Three World Island didn't need to make any changes at all. As long as they fought steadily, they would be able to take Z Jade without paying too much of a price. They would even have the chance to achieve a record of 0 casualties, just like when they attacked the U. However, they didn't choose to do so. They abandoned their original defensive position. Under the lead of the 3 late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators, 2,000 cultivators turned into 3 long dragons and charged into the enemy army. Not only were the spectating cultivators stunned, but the Z Jade Yao cultivators were also stunned. No one expected the Three World Island to make such a shocking decision. As such, after the 3 long dragons soared into the sky, even more deaths occurred. Originally, The 3 late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivators were responsible for killing the enemy. However, no matter how strong they were, killing the star constellations was like chopping vegetables. There was a limit to their efficiency. However, things were different now. The 3 world islands' entire army was attacking. Z Jade was overwhelmed, and hundreds of star constellations were killed in an instant. Using offense as defense, the 3 world island wants to end the battle quickly to avoid unnecessary trouble. Someone saw through the 3 world island's intentions. After all, something had happened during the previous attack on the U. In the end, even the Sunshine Protectors had arrived. The Battle of the U could affect the Sunshine Protectors. Now that they were attacking Zixian, the attention of all 5 Sunshine Protectors would be gathered here. If one of the Sunshine Protectors stood out, the 3 world island would have a hard time dealing with it. Although the chances of this happening were low, they had to be careful. Thus, even though they knew that they could take Z Jade as long as they fought steadily, the 3 world island couldn't let the battle drag on. However, taking the initiative to attack was different. It could greatly reduce the time needed to end the battle. As far as the eyes of the cultivators could see, the 3 dragons of the 3 world island were like 3 torrents. Wherever they went, everything was destroyed. The Z Jade Yao cultivators were fearless, but in the face of absolute power, they were so weak and laughable. What shocked the cultivators even more was that the Z Jade Yao cultivators' tenacity had already left a deep impression on them. But the 3 world islands' cultivators seemed even more ruthless. Not a single one of the several thousand cultivators from both sides was afraid of death. All this time, everyone's impression of the cultivators from the 3 worlds island had remained at the stage where they had attacked the U country. However, that battle had gone smoothly for the cultivators from the 3 worlds island. Truth be told, the cultivators from the 3 worlds island did not display too much bravery. Later on, the cultivators from the 3 worlds island began giving off the impression that they were merchants. That was especially true of Tang Jun, who would smile at everyone he met. At this moment, after witnessing this shocking battle with their own eyes, the cultivators of the 10,000 expanse finally realized that the cultivators of the 3 world island weren't harmless merchants. They were a group of murderers that would kill and burn anyone who dared to offend them. Even if you have Zixian's great reputation. That's right. If they were not a bunch of lawless people, why would they attack a spiritual island like Zixian? The battle was intense, and the Z Jade Yao cultivators had suffered heavy casualties. Originally, Zixian had twice the number of cultivators from the 3 world island. However, as the battle progressed, the number of cultivators on both sides was already equal. In fact, the 3 world islands' cultivators were even more numerous. In the face of the 3 world islands' wanton slaughter, the Z Jade Yao cultivators wanted to organize a resistance. However, even if they did, without Yu Yao leading them, they would not be able to contend against the 3 world island. Despair began to grow and spread. The Z Jade Yao cultivators' fearlessness and bravery seemed to have undergone some subtle changes. Go, all of you, go! A lion's roar suddenly rang out, resounding through heaven and earth. The spectating cultivators immediately turned their heads and looked towards the boiling sea of blood. They realized that it was Lionheart's roar. Lionheart was trapped by Ma Shangxi's blood sea technique, unable to escape. Although he was not clear about the exact situation of the battle outside, he could still sense it with his divine perception. Too many Z Jade Yao cultivators had died. He was the only one left on the entire Z Jade Island, and Yu Yao was still trapped here. The main island was completely powerless against the 3 world islands' attack. If this continued, all the Z Jade Yao cultivators would be wiped out. They could only escape. Even if they were pursued, it was still better than being wiped out in one fell swoop. That was why he had shouted the order. The Z Jade Yao cultivators were already bitterly holding on. Their initial drive had been worn out. Now that the first island master had given the order, many of them no longer hesitated and scattered in all directions. Kill! Don't let a single one of them go. Luan Xiao shouted coldly. This dignified and magnanimous woman's eyes were burning with hatred and fury. Wei Po was a cultivator of her Jade Conch sect. He had finally advanced to Yu Yao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but Lionheart had swallowed him alive. In terms of hatred for Z Jade, she was the most intense. The three World Island masters suddenly dispersed, forming a formation once again. They chased after the fleeing Z Jade Yao cultivators. Z Jade was finished. This thought appeared in the minds of all the spectating cultivators. Although they had already expected this halfway through the battle, when such an outcome actually occurred, it still felt incomparably surreal. A high-grade spiritual island had been taken down by a top-grade spiritual island, with only half of the enemy's forces. Moreover, the time taken this time was even shorter than the previous time when they attacked Baiwa. They had achieved a decisive result in almost half a day. Even if they witnessed such a ridiculous thing with their own eyes, they still dared not believe it. At this moment, a shocking and terrifying energy aura suddenly spread out from a certain direction. Everyone couldn't help but turn their heads in that direction. When they saw the source of the energy aura, they were all shocked. This was because that was where the blood sea was spread out. Lu Yi Ma Shangxi and Lionheart were fighting over it. The aura that suddenly surged out was frighteningly fierce. Although it wasn't at the level of sunshine, it was definitely at the peak of the Yu Yao level. Lionheart took out his Yao core. Someone exclaimed in shock. This kind of aura could not be produced by ordinary means. The only possibility was that Lionheart had taken out the Yao core that he had refined for thousands of years. This was the desperate struggle of a peak late-stage Yu Yao cultivator. It was hard to imagine what had happened in the blood sea that Lionheart had been forced to such an extent. Almost at the same time that person finished speaking, a golden light suddenly bloomed in the boundless blood sea. The golden light in the midst of the blood sea was so dazzling. In the next instant, the golden light suddenly expanded, as if a great sun had exploded. An incomparably terrifying energy swept out in all directions, and a huge hole appeared in the blood sea. Under the illumination of the golden light, Lionheart's contorted figure could be vaguely seen. Lu Yi and Ma Shangxi were nowhere to be seen. When the master and servant realized that Lionheart had taken out his Yao core, they immediately retreated far away. This was a desperate struggle, and even Lu Yi didn't dare to underestimate it. Not only that, Lu Yi even activated his defensive spirit runes to protect his body. The blood sea shook, and Ma Shangxi cried out in shock. Following that, he coughed violently. It was obvious that he had been injured by Lionheart's terrifying attack. Several of the defensive runes on Lu Ye's body also shattered. And this was under the premise that Ma Shangxi's blood sea was protecting him. From this, one could see how terrifying Lionheart's attack was. However, his eyes were incomparably bright, because he knew that this was Lionheart's final attack. For Yao cultivators, taking out their Yao core was something they would only do as a last resort. After this attack, their vitality would be greatly damaged. Without waiting for the terrifying energy to subside, Lu Yi pounced in Lionheart's direction. However, before he arrived, he saw Lionheart turn to look at him, his face extremely pale. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Today's grudge will be repaid 100-fold in the future." As he spoke, his body suddenly emitted a rich purple light. Lu Ye's figure suddenly sped up, and with a leap, he arrived at Lionheart's location. The magic power on his mountain saber surged, and all his strength was poured into this attack as it fiercely chopped down. The saber struck empty air. The moment before the saber landed, the burly figure of Lionheart suddenly disappeared. The flesh on Lu Ye's saber-wielding right arm was torn, because he had used all his strength just now, causing his right arm to bear too much of a burden. However, he didn't seem to feel anything. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed with his divine sense. The blood sea closed, and Ma Shangxi rushed to Lu Ye's side. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and asked in confusion, "Where is he?" There was no reason for such a large Lionheart to disappear for no reason. Teleportation talisman. Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes and turned to look in a certain direction. "Over here." As soon as he finished speaking, a drop of precious blood exploded, and wrapped in a layer of bloody light, he chased after Lionheart. Ma Shangxi was taken aback and hurriedly chased after Lu Yi, but he had just been struck by the aftermath of Lionheart's monster core attack, and his aura was unstable, so there was no way he could catch up. Soon, The bloody light wrapped around Lu Yi disappeared from his sight, leaving him with no choice but to turn around and chase after the fleeing purple jade monster cultivators. A few years ago, when the Western Heart Mountain Road crossed the 10,000 Elephant Sea, they made deals with many forces in exchange for various resources needed by the hominid tribe. Although Purple Jade Island wasn't interested in magic treasures, they were still very interested in talismans. Of course, they had also made deals with the hominid tribe. The teleportation talisman on Lionheart's body was made by the hominid tribe. The distance and speed it could teleport him was much faster than the teleportation talismans refined by other cultivators. However, the teleportation talisman had a bad problem, and that was that once it was activated, it was impossible to control where it would teleport him to. Teleportation talismans were mostly used to save one's life at critical moments. The red talisman on Lu Ye's body was a teleportation talisman used for escape. Because it was a red talisman, its effects were definitely better than Lionheart's. Normally, if Lionheart activated the teleportation talisman and left, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to find out where he went. At that time, Lionheart would only need to find a place to hide, and he would be able to escape with his life. However, during the previous battle, Lionheart's body had been wounded countless times, and those wounds still contained remnant brightness power. Lu Yi didn't know where Lionheart had been teleported to, but as long as they weren't too far apart, he could use the mountain plate saber to sense the brightness power and find him. As long as Lionheart didn't die, he wouldn't be able to avenge Wei Pu. How could he allow Lionheart to continue living? End of chapter. Chapter 1866. Lionheart was heavily injured, and he had sacrificed his monster core to fight to the death. His vitality must have been greatly damaged. This was the perfect opportunity to eliminate him. With the help of the mountain plate blade, Lu Yi could vaguely sense traces of Fang's power in a certain direction. That was undoubtedly where Lionheart was. With the support of his precious blood, Lu Ye's blood escape was pushed to the limit. His entire body turned into a beam of light. As time passed, he could sense the Fang power more clearly. This meant that the distance between them was gradually closing. However, Lu Yi couldn't help but frown. This was because he could sense that Lionheart was fleeing in the direction of the Island of Versatility. After a moment's thought, Lu Yi saw through Lionheart's thoughts. Indeed, now that Z Jade had been destroyed and many of Z Jade's monster cultivators had died, he was the only one left on Yu Yao's level. If he wanted to survive, he had to find a place to recuperate. The Island of Versatility was undoubtedly his best and only choice. Realizing this, Lu Yi immediately took out the star chart of the Island of Versatility to verify his current location. He then estimated Lionheart's location and compared their speeds. His frown deepened. According to his calculations, if he continued to pursue Lionheart like this, all his efforts would be in vain. Lionheart was obviously much closer to the Island of Versatility. Therefore, even if Lionheart's speed was slower than his, he would still reach the Island of Versatility first. Once Lionheart entered the Island of Versatility, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to succeed. He couldn't possibly break into the Island of Versatility to kill someone. That would be courting death. After a moment's thought, Lu Yi changed his original plan. He immediately changed his direction and flew directly towards the Island of Versatility. Since he didn't have enough time, he would intercept Lionheart before the Island of Versatility. At this moment, an old man sat in a palace on the Island of Versatility. In front of him was a seductive woman with a seductive figure and a seductive appearance, who was sobbing softly with a pitiful expression on her face. Not far to the side of the old man, Yuan Cheng stood there respectfully with his head bowed. To be treated so respectfully by Yuan Cheng in a place like this undoubtedly revealed the old man's identity. He was Yuan Du, one of the 5 Sunshine Guardians of the Island of Versatility. In the quiet environment, only the gentle sobbing of the charming woman could be heard. Yuan Cheng did not dare to speak. He only checked his notes from time to time to receive information from the outside. "How's the situation?" Yuan Du suddenly asked. Only then did Yuan Cheng reply, "Patriarch Zixian has been broken. Lionheart ordered Zixian's Yao cultivators to flee while he sacrificed his Yao core for a desperate attack. Then, he used the spirit talisman to escape. What a piece of trash! Yuan Du coldly snorted. From his point of view, he could not understand how Zixian could be so useless. According to his original plan, Zixian only needed to lure Lu Yi to the island and kill him. Then she could quickly send troops to attack the three-world island. Even if they didn't kill Lu Yi, Zixian could still send out her troops. However, once the conflict started, the development of the war was completely different from what they had expected. Zixian suffered heavy losses while Three-World Island remained peaceful and undisturbed by the flames of war. In the end, Zixian failed to attack the Three-World Island. Instead, the cultivators of the Three-World Island descended from the heavens and attacked Zixian. Now even Lionheart had begun to flee. Is that Lu Yi really that strong? Yuan Du looked at Yuan Cheng and asked. Yuan Cheng couldn't help but recall the scene at the banquet. At that time, Lu Yi had rushed straight towards him, and he had almost thought he was dead for sure. Fortunately, Lu Yi had changed his target at the critical moment and killed his junior brother who, only later did he learn that it was just a clone of Lu Yi. Judging from the information we've gathered so far, he is indeed qualified to be the strongest person under the sun. Yuan Cheng replied cautiously. Even Yu Yao, who was as strong as Lionheart, had been forced to flee in panic. In this vast universe which Yu Yao could be his match. Woo-woo. The soft sobs suddenly grew louder, and the charming woman who had been lying in front of Yuan Du burst into tears. She raised her head and looked at Yuan Du pitifully. My poor clan brother died so miserably. So many of my clansmen were also killed. Lord husband, you have to avenge them. Old Tang had once told Lu Yi that this old man Yuan Du didn't have any other hobbies, but he had a lot of concubines. Among the few most favored concubines, there was a six-tailed fox from the amethyst demonic star named Hu Shui. As a member of the six-tailed fox clan, Hu Shui naturally had some relationship with Hu Guang. When news of Hu Guang's death reached her, she immediately came to Yuan Du and cried her heart out. That was why Yuan Du had come to ask Yuan Cheng about it. Hearing Hu Shui cry at this moment, Yuan Du felt a headache coming on. Hu Guang was killed by Lu Yi during the competition between the two islands. Even if Yuan Du had great ability, he couldn't avenge Hu Shui. If he did, the rules that had been maintained for countless years in the myriad phenomenon galaxy would inevitably be broken. However, he really loved this concubine, and he couldn't just brush her off in front of her face, so he could only sigh and say, "Get up and talk." Hu Shui sobbed. "If you don't agree, I won't get up." Only Hu Shui dared to speak to Yuan Du like this. If it were any other concubine he didn't favor, Yuan Du would have already kicked them. But how could he agree to this? Yuan Du could only patiently say, that Lu Yi must die, but we need to think of a good way. This matter needs to be discussed at length. Hu Shui wanted to say something more, but after meeting Yuan Du's gaze, she quickly swallowed her words, got up, wiped the corners of her eyes and said, "You said it yourself. When we go back and kill Lu Yi, I want to see him die with my own eyes." She was not a fool. How could a member of the six-tailed fox clan be stupid? Although she could be arrogant because she was pampered, there was a limit to everything. She also knew that no matter how she acted coquettishly, Yuan Du wouldn't kill Lu Yi himself. But she needed Yuan Du to express his stance. Good. Yuan Du agreed. Only then did Hu Shui stand behind Yuan Du with satisfaction, raising her jade-like hands and gently kneading them, showing her incomparably docile behavior. Her clothes were extremely revealing, and her snow-white skin was dazzling to the eyes. But Yuan Cheng didn't dare to look at it and kept his head down. Suddenly, the sound talisman moved again. Yuan Cheng hurriedly checked and looked up. Ancestor, Lionheart sent a message. Trash, you still have the face to send a message. Yuan Du couldn't help cursing, impatiently asking, "What did he say?" Yuan Cheng said, "He said he's on his way to the all-encompassing island. His injuries are serious, and he needs to come to Ancestor's place to recuperate." Yuan Du coldly snorted. Sacrificing his monster core will indeed greatly injure his vitality. and he needs a great pill to recover. Looking at the entire all-encompassing island, coming to my place is indeed his best choice. Then, Yuanqing said tentatively. Yuan Du sighed. In the end he's Zixian's. It's not good to leave him alone. Go greet him. Yes, Yuanqing complied. This mistress will go with you. When I was in Zixian, senior brother Lionheart took good care of me, like an elder brother. Now that he's in trouble, this mistress will go see if there's anything I can help with, Hu Shui said softly. Go. Yuan Du waved his hand. Of course he wouldn't refuse such a small matter. Yuanqing and Hu Shui flew out together, Yuanqing in front, and Hu Shui behind. This wasn't because Yuanqing was rude, but because Hu Shui's attire made it difficult for him to walk behind her. If he really walked behind her, he wouldn't know where to look. Soon, the two left the all-encompassing island and stood somewhere outside the island, waiting for Lionheart's arrival. How long will it take? Hu Shui asked. Yuanqing said, I just contacted fellow Taoist Lionheart. He's very close. He should be here in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Hu Shui slightly nodded, standing there elegantly. Many cultivators passing by couldn't help but look at her. But Hu Shui didn't seem to notice. Suddenly, a powerful aura rapidly approached from the side. Its speed was simply unimaginable. Hu Shui and Yuanqing couldn't help but turn their heads in that direction, and saw a ball of red light. The red light suddenly stopped not far away from them, revealing a hidden figure. His figure was as straight as a sword, his aura astonishing, his face young, and his expression cold. Yuanqing was shocked. Lu Yi, why would this guy appear here? Indeed, according to the various reports he had received, Lu Yi had chased after Lionheart and left. But if he had been chasing after Lionheart, how could he have appeared in this place? He should have been behind Lionheart. Something was wrong. Yuanqing's heart thumped. He's Lu Yi. Beside Yuanqing, Hu Shui immediately shot her gaze over. Her beautiful eyes that were like stars were filled with rage and killing intent as she stared fixedly at him. She had just begged Yuan Du to kill Lu Yi, but she didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, the real culprit would appear right under her nose. Even though she was extremely shrewd, she couldn't suppress the killing intent in her heart. The two of them spoke one after the other, but Lu Yi only glanced at them indifferently before looking away. Although he didn't know Hu Shui, he recognized Yuanqing at a glance. After all, he had met him twice, but both times, he didn't leave a good impression on Yuanqing. As for Hu Shui, Lu Yi could feel the demonic aura on her, and with her stunning beauty, he could vaguely guess her identity. The first thought that came to his mind was, why are these two people here? But soon he had a guess. Yuanqing seemed to be waiting for someone here. And judging from where Yuanqing was looking, the person he was waiting for was Lionheart, who had fled to the island of versatility. Lu Yi immediately understood that Lionheart must have sent a message to Yuanqing, which was why Yuanqing was waiting here. In other words, he hadn't arrived too late, and Lionheart was approaching. This undoubtedly proved that his previous strategy was correct. He should have rushed directly to the island of versatility to intercept Lionheart. Island Lord Zixian must die today. Just as he was thinking this, a black dot at the edge of his field of vision rushed over. But because it was in poor condition, it wasn't very fast. And from where the black dot was, he could clearly sense the power of brightness. Lu Yi shook the long saber in his hand and rushed forward to meet it. End of chapter. Chapter 1867. Just as Lionheart was about to arrive, Lu Yi suddenly rushed over with a murderous look on his face. No matter how stupid Yuanqing was, he knew what was going to happen. Sensing that something was wrong, he hurriedly shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Zixian and Yu Yao were the only ones left. No matter what, they had to save Lionheart's life. In a daze, he couldn't help but recall the battle between Three World Island and Baiyu. At the last moment, Yu Huan was the only one left on Yu Yao's side. At that time, he wanted to save Yu Huan, but Lu Yi didn't care at all. History was shockingly similar, because today, Lu Yi had no intention of paying attention to him at all. Yuanqing was anxious. If Lionheart was killed in front of him, He wouldn't be able to explain it to Yuan, do. Just as he was wondering what to do, Hu Shui suddenly made her move. With a flip of her jade-like hand, she summoned something that looked like a disc array. Then she shouted, "Go!" With a wave of her hand, she sent the object flying. Yuan Cheng's eyes narrowed. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't!" But how could he make it in time? Hu Shui turned to look at Yuan Cheng with a smug look in her eyes. "Help senior brother Lionheart, and take him back to recuperate." In the next moment, strange ripples that could be seen with the naked eye spread through her body, and Hu Shui's entire body suddenly disappeared. Along with her, Lu Yi, who was facing Lionheart's attack, also disappeared. In fact, when Hu Shui suddenly attacked him, he had sensed it and dodged. This was because he did not know what Hu Shui had attacked him with. But no matter what it was, since he had already deduced Hu Shui's identity, he did not want to be too entangled with this woman. However, the disc-like object suddenly bloomed with a faint light beside him. Then, ripples spread out and radiated in all directions. Then he felt a strange aura lock onto him. His vision turned black and changed. At this time, Yuan Cheng's face was ashen. Hu Shui and Lu Yi disappeared at the same time. Even the disc-like treasure Hu Shui had sent out disappeared. This made him feel like a disaster was imminent. Hu Shui didn't have much contact with Lu Yi. After so many years, she had been favored by Yuan Du. Apart from being obedient and docile in front of Yuan Du, she was basically unscrupulous in front of others. She probably felt that because of her special status, Lu Yi wouldn't do anything to her. That was why she took out that treasure to restrict Lu Ye's movements and protect Lionheart. But after Yuan Cheng came into contact with Lu Yi a few times, he discovered that this guy was a lunatic, a true lawless person. Even if Hu Shui's identity was special, he couldn't guarantee that Lu Yi wouldn't kill her. If Hu Shui's actions angered Lu Yi and she died under Lu Ye's blade, the consequences would be far worse than killing Lionheart. Yuan Cheng shuddered and could only pray that Lu Yi was not too crazy. Otherwise, even if he killed Hu Shui, he would not be able to escape death today. All of this had happened so suddenly that Yuan Cheng didn't even have time to react. Shocked, he couldn't help but sigh at how quickly Hu Shui had thought things through. Based on the current situation, this was indeed the best way to protect Lionheart. If it weren't for that treasure restraining Lu Yi, Lionheart would definitely die when Lu Yi faced him head-on. In an inexplicable space, Lu Yi suddenly appeared. As he looked around, he frowned. This was because he was in a void filled with asteroids of all sizes. At this moment, he was standing on a small asteroid. He slowly turned his head and saw an enchanting figure quietly standing there. The battle stage. Lu Yi immediately understood what had happened. Hu Shui had taken out the battle stage and pulled him into the space of the battle stage. Lu Yi was no stranger to battle stages. There were battle stages in the 9 provinces, and they were a kind of rare treasure. However, the battle stage in the 9 provinces was actually not a true treasure. It was merely a tool created by Little Nine. Once the person who possessed this kind of tool activated the battle stage, they would be able to connect with the mysteries of the heavens and create a special space for one-on-one battles. They would not rest until they were dead. The reason it was called a prop was because once the battle stages in the 9 provinces were separated from the 9 provinces, they had no effect. They required the support of the 9 provinces' secrets of the heavens to be effective. The prop created by Little Nine was undoubtedly born from the real battle stage. In fact, it was not just the battle stage. There were many rare treasures in the 9 provinces that could be found in the starry sky. What Hu Shui had taken out was undoubtedly the real battle stage. Moreover, the might that this rare treasure could unleash was much greater than the inferior products in the 9 provinces. After the battle stages in the 9 provinces were activated, they could not provide any assistance to the holder of the battle stage. But the real battle stage was different. Hu Shui was the owner of the battle stage. She had a very large degree of control over this rare treasure. With this treasure, she could fight against those of a higher cultivation level. The other biggest difference was that once the inferior products in the 9 provinces were activated, unless one of the 2 sides died, the other side would not be able to escape. But the real battle stage would not be like this. Lu Yi stared at Hu Shui and shouted fiercely, "Release!" As the owner of the battle stage, Wuxia could take the initiative to release it. Lionheart was about to arrive. Lu Yi did not have the time to waste here, especially when his opponent was a monster that was related to Yuan Du. She was not easy to fight, nor was she easy to kill. Tangling with her would only be a waste of time. Wishful thinking. Wuxia clenched her teeth. Her enchanting and charming expression had been replaced by ruthlessness. When she had begged Yuan Du to kill Lu Yi, she had only been retreating in order to advance. She knew that Yuan Du would not agree to such a thing, but she had never imagined that she would have the chance to personally kill her enemy. She also had a late-stage Yu Yao cultivation. With the support of the battle stage, she was confident that she was not inferior to any Yu Yao. Even if Lionheart was here, she could still fight him. So when she saw Lu Yi, she immediately realized that this was a chance for revenge. That was why she had decisively taken out the battle stage and caught Lu Yi by surprise. Moreover, she could also save Lionheart. It could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. As she spoke, monster essence surged around Wuxia. An inexplicable power descended from the sky. Lu Yi immediately saw bright runes lighting up all around him. In the blink of an eye, they formed a large array, trapping him within. The great array was attached to the battle stage. It was not Wuxia's own ability, but as the owner of the battle stage, she could mobilize the might of the great array at any time. In the blink of an eye, the entrapment array had taken shape. The area around Lu Yi had turned into a cage. Immediately after, even more bright lines flashed within the cage. One great array after another quickly took shape. First trap, then kill. This was Wuxia's confidence in dealing with Lu Yi. With the support of the battle stage, no Yu Yao could break through the entrapment array. So there was only one thing she needed to do, and that was to constantly mobilize the might of the great array and kill Lu Yi here. Energy suddenly erupted as the might of the great array began to erupt. Within the entrapment array, golden light flashed and flames soared into the sky. A mysterious power swept out in all directions, flattening everything. Wuxia's eyes flashed with a myriad of colors. Lu Yi's figure had long disappeared. She laughed heartily. The so-called number one under the sun was nothing more than this. Her laughter came to an abrupt halt, because Wuxia was surprised to discover that a crack had suddenly appeared on the barrier of the entrapment array. From within the entrapment array, an extremely terrifying aura suddenly erupted. But the source of this aura was not the array she had activated. Asterisk Kacha. Asterisk. A series of cracking sounds rang out as the cracks on the barrier of the entrapment array suddenly spread out in all directions. How could this be? Wuxia was dumbfounded. As the master of the battle stage, she could clearly sense just how terrifying the power that had suddenly erupted was. It was simply beyond her understanding. In her shock, Wuxia's divine sense surged as she hurriedly tried to stabilize the entrapment array. As long as she could stabilize it, she would have a chance to repair it. However, she no longer had that chance. With a loud crash, the entrapment array barrier completely shattered. The entrapment array that she had placed all her hopes on didn't even last for 3 breaths of time. The moment the entrapment array shattered, the power of the many great arrays she had activated swept out in all directions. At the same time, the phantom of a black tortoise suddenly rushed out from the violent energy and pounced towards her. Wuxia was dumbfounded because when she looked around, she saw 1, 2, 3, a total of 7 Lu Yis forming a black tortoise array. Every Lu Yi was vivid and lifelike, and every Lu Yi exuded the aura of a mid-stage Yu Yao. Admittedly, the entrapment array was incomparably sturdy, and it was beyond the scope of Yu Yao's ability to break through. However, 7 mid-stage Yu Yao's Yu Yao, even a black tortoise like Lu Yi couldn't break through the entrapment array. Wuxia cried out in alarm as she hurriedly retreated. At the same time, she continuously mobilized the power of the battle stage to launch a ferocious attack to obstruct Lu Yi. However, it was completely ineffective. It was true that she had the support of the battle stage and could borrow the power of this place, but the power that Lu Yi's true body and the precious blood avatar could display when they formed a formation was truly beyond the scope of Yu Yao's power. Suddenly, the black tortoise array closed in. The phantom of the black tortoise raised a palm and ruthlessly slammed it down. With a miserable scream, Hu Shui was sent flying, blood spurting from her mouth. In that instant, she thought that she was dead for sure. Her delicate body slammed into a meteorite, and she cut an extremely sorry figure. Before she could get up, an ice-cold blade pressed against her slender white neck. When she looked up, Lu Ye's indifferent face looked down from above. Release! Sensing Lu Ye's dense killing intent, Hu Shui couldn't help but shudder. However, when she recalled the scene just now, she calmed down and sneered. You should know who I am. Do you dare to kill me? The reason she made such a deduction was that when the black tortoise attacked, the young man in front of her had obviously held back. Otherwise, she would have had no chance of surviving that attack. The fact that the other party held back meant that he was afraid of something. And he was afraid of none other than Yuan Du. While provoking Lu Yi, all kinds of thoughts flashed through her mind. Calculating the time, Lionheart shouldn't have reached the island of versatility yet. Therefore, no matter what, she couldn't release the battle stage and set Lu Yi free. No matter what, she had to buy some time. I'll count to 3. Lu Ye's long blade pressed down slightly, and the sharp edge of the blade cut through Hu Shui's skin. 1. The blade pressed down again, cutting open her flesh and causing dark red blood to flow out. 2. He activated his transcendence energy and poured it into the long blade. The blade sank an inch into her flesh. His killing intent was so condensed that it was almost tangible. End of chapter. Chapter 1868. Against Zixian, everything was going according to plan. Using the minor constellation hall to break Zixian's defensive formation, he first killed Bao Yuyu, then killed Hu Guang, and attracted the cultivators of the three-world island. The battle was coming to an end, but there was one thing that was not perfect. Therefore, from Lu Ye's point of view, he had to kill Lionheart to give an explanation to Wei Pe and Wan Xiaoa, who died in front of him. Since he recognized Hu Shui's identity, he naturally knew the consequences of killing this woman. However, there were some things in this world that could not be avoided even if one knew they could not be done. Moreover, he felt that Hu Shui should not have reached the level of facing death with equanimity. Therefore, he had to show his attitude. Only then could he intimidate the other party. The Pan Mountain saber pressed against the other party's slender neck. Lu Ye's killing intent was awe-inspiring, and the words that came out of his mouth were like ancient ice, chilling to the bone. Hu Shui blinked. Seeing the determination in Lu Ye's eyes, she realized that the other party was not trying to scare her. If she did not release the battle stage, this young man would probably really kill her. Of course, she could also take a gamble. Perhaps the other party was just trying to scare her. With Yuan Du standing behind her, would there really be anyone who dared to kill her on the 10,000 manifestation sea? How should she choose? Even with Hu Shui's nimbleness, she was caught in a dilemma. Seeing that Lu Yi was about to open his mouth again, and the saber in his hand was about to continue pressing down, Hu Shui no longer dared to hesitate. She cried out in alarm. No! Release! I'll release! Hu Shui responded, following the activation of her transcendence energy. The sound of silk tearing rang out, crisp and melodious. Lu Yi was stunned, staring at the snow-white figure in front of him. Hu Shui's expression became extremely bitter, as if she was about to cry. 2 inexplicable blushes even appeared on her cheeks. Due to the activation of her transcendence energy, the shadows of the 6 snow-white fox tails behind her swayed, adding a hint of wildness and seductiveness. What are you doing? Lu Ye's eyes drooped. Hu Shui blinked. Didn't you ask me to release? I've already released. She had indeed released. But what she released was not the battle stage's restraints, but her own clothes. Even though Lu Yi had experienced countless battles, he had never experienced such an outrageous thing. In the midst of a battle of life and death, when the long saber was about to take her life, such a delicate woman suddenly had her clothes torn apart. This matter was indeed somewhat outrageous. Hu Shui withdrew her seductive manner and suddenly covered her mouth as she chuckled. Oh, are you asking me to unlock the battle platform? Why didn't you say so earlier? Looks like I misunderstood. All right, I'll undo the seal right now. A hint of provocation flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes. I dare to undo it. But do you dare to let me undo it? Lu Yi finally understood what this woman was up to. If Hu Shui were to release the battle platform at this moment, then the state of the two would immediately appear before the eyes of the cultivators in the outside world. At that time, when the bystanders saw this scene, what would they think? What would Yuan Du think if the news reached his ears? The Guardian of Sunshine was not allowed to interfere in the battle for the spiritual island. This was the rule of the Wanxiang Sea, unless one of the parties requested for arbitration. Therefore, even if Lionheart fled to the Wanxiang Island, Yuan Du would not personally appear. He only sent Yuan Cheng to receive him. But if the matter of Lu Yi of the Three-World Island bullying the weak and humiliating Hu Shui was exposed, then Yuan Du would have a reason to intervene. Even if he killed Lu Yi on the spot, no one would say anything. Any man with a bit of courage would not be able to remain indifferent when his woman was being bullied like this. This was a matter of a man's pride and dignity, especially when Yuan Du was a strong cultivator in the Sunshine State. The battle stage was sealed. Who knew what would happen between a man and a woman in there? At that time, Hu Shui only needed to add fuel to the fire, and Lu Yi would die no matter how many lives he had. As this thought flashed through his mind, Lu Yi began to admire the female demon in front of him. Under such circumstances, she could actually come up with a countermeasure so quickly. He had to admit that she was quick-witted. Restraining his killing intent, he said, I've long heard that the Six-Tailed Fox clan is cunning and changeable. You really live up to your reputation. Thank you for the compliment. Hu Shui pursed her lips and smiled. She raised 2 fingers and placed them on the body of the mountain blade that was pressed against her neck. Gently pushing it away, she stood up leisurely, not caring that her body was exposed. The 6 tails behind her danced even more enchanting. I don't have any other requests. You and I will wait here for 30 breaths. I will release the battle stage and set you free. Of course, I won't tarnish your reputation. I don't want to expose myself in public like this, so you can rest assured. To save Lionheart, is it worth it? Lu Yi looked at her. Hu Shui's expression became melancholy. Of course it's worth it. She looked at Lu Ye's several clones and said with interest, Your cloning technique is very mysterious. What a pity. What? Hu Shui turned to look at Lu Yi. What she saw was an extremely bright blade light. Hu Shui's expression changed drastically. She only had time to cry out in alarm before the resplendent blade light enveloped her. When the saber light dissipated, Hu Shui also disappeared without a trace. Only a cloud of blood mist was left behind. Within the blood mist, a pink Yao core and a few storage rings were extremely conspicuous. Lu Yi put away his blade, his expression as calm as water. The 6 treasured blood clones turned back into treasured blood and returned to his main body. At the same time, the surrounding scenery collapsed rapidly. This undoubtedly meant that the shackles of the battle stage had been released with Hu Shui's death. If possible, he actually didn't want to kill Hu Shui, just like he didn't want to kill Yuan Cheng and Zixian. Because these 2 people were too close to Yuan Du, killing them would definitely cause trouble. However, Hu Shui's response, which she thought was clever, forced Lu Yi to kill her. Although Hu Shui had promised that she wouldn't tarnish his reputation when she released the battle stage, which undoubtedly meant that she would wear her clothes before releasing the battle stage, Lu Yi didn't dare to believe it so easily. After interacting with Hu Shui for a short while, Lu Yi had already deeply experienced this woman's cunning. Who knew which words from her mouth were true and which were false? If Hu Shui still maintained this appearance and released the battle stage, he wouldn't be able to explain himself even if he opened his mouth. Therefore, there was only one thing Lu Yi could do, which was to kill and destroy the corpse. Hu Shui had already turned into a burst of bloody mist. Who knew whether she was wearing clothes or not? As for whether it would anger Yuan Du, that was certain. However, Hu Shui attacked him first, so it was reasonable for him to counterattack and kill the enemy. Even Yuan Du couldn't find fault with it. He chose the lesser of 2 evils. Killing Hu Shui was better than being slandered by her. As for the trouble that would follow, he already had a grudge with Yuan Du. Zixian's targeting of the Three Realms Island had Yuan Du's shadow. Would there be any less trouble? After collecting the Yao core and several storage rings left behind by Hu Shui, his eyes lit up. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he had already reappeared on the 10,000 Elephant Sea, still at the position where he had disappeared. There was also a treasure beside him, which was Hu Shui's battle stage. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. The battle stages of the 9 continents were one-time consumable treasures, but the battle stages in the starry sky weren't. They could be used multiple times. Lu Yi hurriedly raised his head and looked forward, but Lionheart was nowhere to be seen. He abruptly turned around and saw a tall and sturdy figure standing on the 10,000 Elephant Island. His aura was weak and his face was extremely pale. Who else could it be but Lionheart? Lu Yi clenched his teeth. He was still one step too late. He didn't spend too much time fighting with Hu Shui, and he didn't hesitate to kill her. However, Lionheart still entered the 10,000 Elephant Island. This meant that the assassination attempt had failed completely. Lu Yi glared at Lionheart with eyes that were about to spit fire. Yuan Cheng stood beside Lionheart. At this moment, Yuan Cheng's face was filled with horror. He looked behind Lu Yi and searched around, obviously looking for Hu Shui. But how could he find her? Although he already had a guess, he couldn't help but ask, Lu Yi, where's Hu Shui? Lu Yi ignored him and pointed his mountain pan saber at Lionheart. You'd better hide in there for the rest of your life. Lionheart had entered the 10,000 Elephant Island. He couldn't kill his way in. That was no different from courting death. However, Lionheart couldn't hide here forever. If he dared to leave the 10,000 Elephant Island one day, it would be his death. He sheathed his saber and turned around to leave. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat as a great danger descended from the sky. Without thinking, he hurriedly channeled his spiritual energy to connect with the red talisman in his body. When he killed Hu Shui, he had already foreseen this scene. After all, Hu Shui was one of Yuan Du's most beloved concubines. It was impossible for Yuan Du to not react when she was killed. As it turned out, Yuan Du had indeed come. Since he had foreseen this scene, how could Lu Yi not react? The red talisman in his body was his trump card. If he wanted to escape from Rizhao, he had to channel the power of the red talisman. As long as he could avoid Yuan Du here, he could survive. He killed Hu Shui because the other party attacked first, and he retaliated. It happened in front of everyone's eyes. There was no way to fake it. However, Yuan Du came in a rage. His fist was not as hard as the others, so Lu Yi naturally had to avoid him. If Yuan Du continued to pursue him, it would be a violation of the rules they had set. At that time, the other 10,000 Elephant Sea Guardians would most likely not sit by and watch. It could even be said that Yuan Du's arrival at this moment had already broken the rules. Of course, to the 10,000 Elephant Sea Guardians, everyone else was outsiders, while Yuan Du was one of them. Even if they wanted to uphold the rules here, it was still possible for them to react a little slower. And that little delay was enough for a Rizhao to take Yu Yao's life. Therefore, Lu Yi couldn't and didn't dare to entrust his life to others. Yuan Du's Rizhao's aura spread out. Before he arrived, his aura was already as heavy as a mountain, making it difficult to breathe. Lu Yi had already activated the power of the red talisman. Just as he was about to activate it, he suddenly felt another Rizhao's aura spreading out from another direction on the 10,000 Elephant Island. The pressure brought by Yuan Du's aura was instantly swept away. Then a third aura. Lu Yi couldn't help but be surprised. How did the 10,000 Elephant Island's Rizhao react so quickly? Originally, he thought that even if Yuan Du broke the rules, the other Rizhao would just turn a blind eye and let Yuan Du vent his anger first. He didn't expect that there would be someone who really wanted to uphold the rules. This surprised him greatly. End of chapter. Chapter 1869. Lu Yi did not dare to place his life in the hands of others, but the reaction of the other Sunshine Guardians of the Wanxiang Sea was beyond his expectations. The sudden disappearance of the pressure from Yuan Du's aura was the best evidence. The Sunshine Guardians who appeared later were obviously competing with Yuan Du. That was why the pressure suddenly disappeared. Blinking his eyes, Lu Yi gave up the idea of activating the red talisman. Of course, he was still on standby just in case. At this moment, the situation on the island of versatility was changing rapidly. The Sunshine Guardians were competing with each other. Even if they did not fight, the confrontation between their auras was shocking enough. Countless cultivators looked up in fear. No one knew what was going on. Some people even inexplicably recalled that a few years ago, an expert had killed a Sunshine Guardian on the island of versatility. They could not help but wonder if the past was repeating itself. But since that incident, the number of Sunshine Guardians in the Wanxiang Sea was reduced from 3 to 5. Who would dare to be presumptuous here? But soon, the confrontation between the Sunshine Guardians' auras was restrained. The terrifying aura that swept across the area also disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, a few figures appeared in front of Lu Yi. The first one to appear was Yuan Du. Lu Yi had met him before, and naturally recognized him at first glance. However, Yuan Du had lost all his face at that time. This was also the reason why no spiritual island would want to visit him after that. As a Sunshine Guardian, how could Yuan Du not bear a grudge against Yu Yao after suffering such a great loss? But due to the rules, he could not do it himself. Otherwise, he would have killed Lu Yi on the Three-World Island. Now that they met again, the old hatred had not disappeared, but a new one. Yuan Du's eyes were about to burst into flames. Old ancestor. Yuan Cheng's face was extremely pale. He kowtowed to Yuan Du trembling. Although Hu Shue's death had nothing to do with him, Hu Shue had come out with him. Now that Lionheart had come to rescue her, Hu Shue was dead. When the city gate is on fire, the fish in the moat will suffer. How could Yuan Cheng not be afraid? He had seen with his own eyes how much his old ancestor doted on Hu Shue. Trash! Yuan Du stared at Lu Yi, gritting his teeth and scolding Yuan Cheng. Yuan Cheng knelt down, not daring to raise his head. At this moment, Lu Yi was looking to the other side, because 3 more figures had suddenly appeared. 2 were in front, and 1 was slightly behind. If he was not mistaken, the one who fought against Yuan Du just now should be one of them. The key point was that all 3 of them were women, and Lu Yi knew 2 of them. The one on the left was one of the 5 Sunshine Guardians of the All Elephants Island, Mu Qing. When Mount Fengsuan from the west arrived at the Wanxiang Sea, the 5 Rizhao Guardians had come out to greet them. Lu Yi had seen them from afar, and knew that Mu Qing was from the Kunyu realm in the local galaxy. Beside Mu Qing was a woman who wasn't very tall, but was extremely plump. However, her face was shrouded in light, so Lu Yi couldn't see her appearance clearly. However, those who could stand side by side with Mu Qing were undoubtedly cultivators of the Sunshine sect. Lu Yi didn't understand. Mu Qing was the only female among the 5 guardians of the island of all manifestations. Where did this woman come from? And for some reason, the other party gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if he had seen him somewhere before. However, when he looked at the woman behind the woman, Lu Yi saw through the woman's identity. That was because he knew the woman standing behind the woman. She was from the Chailing realm, the one Chu Shun called Aunt Yu. Lu Yi had interacted with Aunt Yu a few times. Basically, Aunt Yu would come out to greet him every time he went to the Chailing realm. Aunt Yu was here, so the woman's identity was obvious. Jiu Yan. Lu Yi carefully sensed the aura of Mu Qing and Jiu Yan. He immediately understood that the one who fought against Yuan Du was not Mu Qing, but Jiu Yan, the Chailing realm's realm lord. Lu Yi suddenly understood. No wonder the Rizhao Guardians of the All Manifestations Sea were so selfless. They would rather offend Yuan Du to stand up for the rules. Now it seemed that he was overthinking. Even if these Rizhao Guardians noticed that Yuan Du had broken the rules, they didn't intend to show up. Instead, it was Jiu Yan who stood up for him. As Lu Ye's thoughts changed, he saw Aunt Yu winking at him, giving him a reassuring look. Lu Yi felt relieved. Yes, the Three Worlds Island also had Rizhao Guardians. When Chu Shun brought a group of Chailing realm cultivators to the island to cultivate, it meant that the Three Worlds Island had Chailing realm's Jiu Yan. Although the Three Worlds Island had never used Chailing realm's reputation to do anything, and Chu Shun and the Chailing realm cultivators only cared about cultivation on the Three Worlds Island and didn't participate in anything else, the relationship between them was one of protection. because everyone's relationship was too casual. Even Lu Yi usually ignored this relationship. But at the critical moment his backer stood up. Lu Yi suddenly felt a lot straighter. Was it a coincidence that Jiu Yan was on the All Manifestations Island at this time? Obviously not. Chu Shun, this brat, is pretty good at planning ahead. I'll have to thank him later. What's going on? Mu Qing pretended to be confused and asked. Since when did people fight outside the All Manifestations Island? What a scandal! Although the All Manifestations Island forbade fighting on the surface, it didn't restrict outside the island. But for so many years, no one had ever fought so close to the All Manifestations Island. Everyone came to the All Manifestations Sea to make a living, so they had to give the All Manifestations Island some face. She knew about the grudge between the Three Worlds Island and Yuandu, and had long heard of Lu Ye's name. At first, she didn't understand why Jiu Yan, who she didn't have much interaction with, suddenly came to visit her 2 days ago. It wasn't until Yuandu's sudden movement that she understood. Jiu Yan's visit was fake. She was waiting for this moment. She suddenly felt a little tired. The Rizhao Guardians of the Galaxy weren't very united, especially after the incident at the All Manifestations Island. Che Ling Realm had always had a lot of complaints. If she didn't handle today's matter well, Jiu Yan definitely wouldn't let it go. Among the people present, Lionheart was dispirited, Yuan Cheng was prostrating on the ground, and Lu Yi looked around. It seemed that she was the only one who could answer. Her expression immediately turned serious, and she cupped her fists. Lu Yi of the Three Worlds Island greets the Guardians. Mu Qing nodded. This queen knows who you are. Tell me what happened here. Lu Yi said, replying to the Guardians, this island was attacking Zixian Island a few days ago, and we had some success. Zixian's first island lord, Lionheart, escaped, and I chased after him. Unexpectedly, I was ambushed by a demoness. She took advantage of my unpreparedness and summoned the battle arena. I fought her fiercely for 800 rounds and killed her. That's right, that demoness is from the Six-Tailed Fox clan. She must have a close relationship with Zixian, so she ambushed me here. Although Yuan Du already knew that Hu Shui was doomed, when he heard Lu Yi say that he fought for 800 rounds and killed her, the corners of his eyes twitched with heartache. Lu Yi changed the topic. But I don't know how I angered Guardian Yuan Du, causing him to descend from the sky and try to suppress me. As he spoke, Lu Ye's expression became stern, and his voice resonated. Lord Guardian, since the cultivators of my three-world island came to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, we have always scrupulously followed the rules and dared not cross the line in the slightest, let alone incur the hatred of others. When we attacked Zixian, it was a self-defense counterattack. Guardian Yuan Du used his strength to bully the weak and tried to suppress me. I refused to accept this, so Lord Guardian, please uphold justice. Back then, when he faced Yuan Du alone, he was indignant and forced to speak out. He was more or less guilty, because if he really angered Yuan Du and caused Yuan Du to ignore him, he would not have a good ending. But today he no longer felt that way. He was in an extremely good mood. The feeling of having a backer was indeed different. Yuan Du did not speak and let Lu Yi speak, only staring at him coldly. With his status, Yuan Du naturally would not quarrel with Lu Yi. It would only be embarrassing. His silence made Mu Qing very uncomfortable. She actually did not want to get involved in this kind of matter. Lu Yi criticized him in front of her and asked her to uphold justice. How could she do so? Reprimand Yuan Du? Not to mention that she was also a guardian. She did not have the qualifications to do so. Even if she did, she would not do so. In terms of personal feelings, she was naturally more biased towards Yuan Du. But Julian was standing next to them. Lu Yi had already asked her to uphold justice, so she could not do nothing. Moreover, there were so many cultivators gathered around to watch. Glancing at Lu Yi, Mu Qing said indifferently, "You were attacked by a sneak attack? And then you killed the attacker?" "Yes, many fellow Taoists saw it with their own eyes." Lu Yi hurriedly nodded. "If Lord Guardian does not believe me, you can ask fellow Taoist Yuan Cheng over there. He knows what happened from beginning to end." Yuan Cheng, who was kneeling on the ground, trembled. He raised his head and glanced at Lu Yi, his eyes full of innocence and anger. He was already crawling here, and did not dare to move, but Lu Yi still pointed out his name. Wasn't this pushing him into a fire pit? Mu Qing turned to look at Yuan Cheng and asked, Yuan Cheng, is what he said false? Yuan Cheng's lips squirmed, but he did not dare to answer. If he said yes, he would be lying through his teeth. He would definitely not have a good end, because he was not the only one who saw the scene just now. If he said no, he would not be able to get past Yuan Du for a moment. He wished he could just faint here and be done with it. He never expected that just coming out to meet Lionheart would cause such a ruckus. If he had known earlier, he would not have let Hu Shui come with him. She really could not do anything right. What? Are you mute? Mu Qing looked angry. Yuan Cheng looked at Yuan Du's back with pleading eyes. Yuan Du coldly said, If you have something to say, say it. It was really difficult to cover up something that happened in public. As if he had been pardoned, Yuan Cheng hurriedly replied, What Lu Yi said is true. Mu Qing nodded. Fights happen on the Thousand Creations Sea from time to time. It is not uncommon for a sneak attack to fail and be killed instead. She looked at Lu Yi. If there are any fights next time, try to stay away from the Thousand Creations Island. Don't involve the guests. End of chapter. Chapter 1870. Yes, Lu Yi hurriedly responded. Please rest assured, Guardian Mu. This will never happen again. Mu Qing nodded. Just as she was thinking that this kid was easy to talk to, Lu Yi spoke again. I fought with that demoness and killed her. But I don't know why I angered Guardian Yuan Du and caused him to come out and suppress me. Hearing this, Mu Qing couldn't help but frown. She glared at Lu Yi with a hint of warning. However, Lu Yi acted as if he didn't see it and continued. Guardian Mu, this vast Wanxiang Sea has you guardians who maintain the rules. For countless years, you have been fair and impartial. So we foreign cultivators dare to settle down here and continue to make the Wanxiang Sea prosperous. There are rules in the Wanxiang Sea. When the major forces fight, Guardian Rizhao can't interfere, unless one party requests for arbitration. Guardian Yuan Du's actions just now made me quite puzzled. But I don't know when my Three-World Island offended Guardian Yuan Du as the third island master of the Three-World Island. Yi Rou's personal honor doesn't matter. But behind Yi Rou is the Three-World Island. So I boldly ask for an explanation from Guardian Yuan Du. Mu Qing narrowed her eyes slightly. Only now did she realize that Lu Yi wasn't easy to talk to. This guy was like a dog, taking every opportunity to bite. What grudge did the Three-World Island have with Yuan Du? Why did Yuan Du suddenly suppress you? Don't you know in your heart? By asking these questions at this time, Lu Yi was praising the Rizhao guards even more. Even without Jiu Yan, Mu Qing could not ignore Lu Yi's question in front of so many cultivators. Let alone the fact that Jiu Yan was standing at the side. Rizhao was the strongest force in the Wanxiang Sea, but since ancient times, only the native galaxy's Rizhao was in charge here. This was the result of the balance between the native galaxy and the other galaxies. They were in charge here, so they had to maintain fairness and uphold the various rules they set. If they didn't care about these rules, then why would the experts from the other galaxies care? Mu Qing finally understood how Yuan Du felt when he was verbally coerced that day. Mu Qing turned to look at Yuan Du and asked, Senior brother, what happened just now? Yuan Du looked at Lu Yi coldly. Since he appeared and said a few words, he had remained silent. It was only now that he opened his mouth. There are people fighting here, and the movements are quite loud. This king noticed something strange, and was afraid of disturbing the guests passing by, so I came to investigate. At the same time, I suppressed the situation immediately to prevent the situation from deteriorating. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. There was nothing wrong with what he said. I see. Mu Qing nodded slightly, and looked at Lu Yi. You heard it. Lu Yi thought for a moment and cupped his fists at Yuan Du. I misunderstood Guardian Yuan Du's good intentions. Please forgive me. Sure, Mu Qing said. Since it's a misunderstanding, then it's fine. She looked at Lu Yi. Do what you need to do. Lu Yi cupped his fists. Farewell. He glanced at Aunt Yu again. nodded slightly, and cast a grateful look at her. Then, he activated his magic power and flew away. After Lu Yi left, Mu Qing said softly, "Disperse." Since Rizhao had spoken, the surrounding cultivators didn't dare to disobey. They scattered like birds and beasts. Yuan Du snorted coldly, and turned to walk into the island of all appearances. "Senior brother Yuan." Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind him. Yuan Du stopped and turned to look. He met Jiu Yan's gaze. Jiu Yan looked him in the eye and said coldly, "I'm not dead yet." What she meant was that before she died, the Three Worlds Island would always be under her protection. Yuan Du better not do anything in secret. Yuan Du understood, but he frowned and turned to leave without saying anything. Mu Qing looked at Jiu Yan and hesitated for a while before sighing. "Senior sister, you're Vientiane Hikari after all." Jiu Yan snorted. "I know I'm Vientiane Hikari, but some people don't." Back then, Unparalleled Island was built by Chu Shun. After Unparalleled Island became a top-tier spiritual island, the local star system felt that it was necessary to control this new top-tier spiritual island. At that time, Jiu Yan didn't resist too much. She felt that a top-tier spiritual island wasn't something that Chu Shun could control. Therefore she acquiesced. As long as Chu Shun agreed, everything would be fine. However, Chu Shun didn't agree. The local star system immediately attacked and took Unparalleled Island by force. This made Jiu Yan very unhappy. Although Chu Shun wasn't hurt at all, Jiu Yan's attitude was that she could give it to him, but he couldn't take it by force. She could think from the perspective of the local star system, but some people took her concession as weakness. This happened many years ago. Let bygones be bygones. Now Three World Island was targeted again. This made Jiu Yan very angry. Indeed, when Three World Island wanted to worship her, she didn't take the initiative to accept them. When Lu Yi entered Che Lingjia, she didn't even show her face. It was mainly because of Chu Shun. He led a group of cultivators from Che Lingjia to Three World Island to cultivate, and told the outside world that Three World Island wanted to worship Jiu Yan. However, regardless of whether she took the initiative to accept them or not, the fact was that Three World Island was under her protection. Knowing this, Yuan Du still stirred up trouble in the dark. He ordered Zixian to attack Three World Island. He didn't take her seriously at all. Even a person made of mud would be angry, let alone someone like Jiu Yan, who fought her way to the top. Therefore, when she received Chu Shun's message a few days ago, she immediately left Che Lingjia and rushed to Island of Versatility. On the surface, she was going to visit Mu Qing and reminisce about the past. However, she was actually guarding against Yuan. This old man had a precedent. When Three World Island fought against Bai Yu, he showed up. It was hard to say if he wouldn't show up again this time. It turned out that she was right to come. If she didn't come this time, Lu Yi would have been in trouble. Turning her head to look in the direction Lu Yi left, Jiu Yan frowned. This young man, will he cause trouble, or will trouble provoke him? Looking at all the eye-catching events that happened in the Island of Versatility over the years, it seemed that he was involved. In the distance, Lu Yi rushed towards Zixian. In the confrontation with Yuan Du just now, both sides had a tacit understanding that no one would mention the dead Hu Shui. Lu Yi didn't want to mention it, so as to avoid angering Yuan Du with Jiu Yan by his side. He was confident, but there was a limit to everything. Deliberately provoking Rizhao was not a wise move. Yuan Du and Mu Qing naturally had their own reasons for not mentioning it. Therefore this concubine, who was favored by Yuan Du, became a nameless demoness in both sides' mouths. But in any case, Lu Yi killed Hu Shui. If the previous grudge with Yuan Du wasn't too deep, it was completely different now. It was absolutely to the extent that they would fight to the death. It was truly disgusting to have Rizhao guarding the Island of Versatility. In the end, the Three World Island was an outsider. Its status and strength were inferior. If Rizhao was willing to abide by the rules it set, then it was fine. But if there came a day when the so-called rules could no longer bind Rizhao, then the Three World Island's cultivators would no longer have a foothold in the Island of Versatility. But even if that day came, Lu Yi wasn't afraid. At worst, he could just transfer the Three World Island's cultivators to the Mermaid Clan's territory through the Azure Sea Snail's door. Although he killed Hu Shui, he didn't achieve his goal. As long as Lionheart didn't die, Lu Ye's anger wouldn't be appeased. But since Lionheart had already entered the island of versatility, it wouldn't be easy to kill him. As long as he hid inside and didn't come out, Lu Yi couldn't do anything to him. What should he do to lure Lionheart out? As he flew, he fell into deep thought. By the time Lu Yi rushed back to Zixian Island, the battle had already ended. Originally, Zixian only had Lionheart, and the Yu Yao left. The defensive formation was also broken. As the 2,000 cultivators of the three-world island forced their way in, the three Yu Yaos led the way and transformed into 3 long dragons. Zixian's defeat was already set in stone. At Lionheart's command, the Purple Jade's Yao cultivators fled in panic. The three-world island's cultivators split up and chased after them. After the battle, it was time to clean up the battlefield. It had to be said that this was the most enjoyable thing to do. The storage rings and Dharma artifacts obtained from killing the enemy cultivators were only the tip of the iceberg. Zixian Island's treasure vault was the real prize. When Lu Yi rushed back, Luan Xiao was in the middle of taking inventory of the treasury. Not counting the other items, just the spirit jades alone had already piled up to more than 1 billion spirit jades. There were also countless other resources. After all, it was a top-tier spirit island. The loot from the Baiwa Island's treasure vault couldn't be compared to what was in front of them. Lionheart escaped to the three-world island, Lu Yi said as he stood beside Luan Xiao. Junior Marshal brother, you've done enough. Don't take it to heart. If Wei Pa knows this in the underworld, he should be able to rest in peace. Luan Xiao nodded. The sadness from Wei Po's death had completely dissipated. Who in this world could forcefully break into a top-tier spirit island just because of one person's death? In the vast Wanxiang Sea, only Lu Yi could do it. From the beginning to the end, only Wei Pa had died on the three-world island. On the other hand, as many as 7 purple jade cultivators and 3,000 star mansions had died. If Wei Po's spirit was still alive, he would be laughing to the heavens. With so many Yao cultivators dying with him, he definitely wouldn't feel aggrieved about dying. Wasn't it the same when they fought the Baiwa Island? The reason for that battle was simply because Tang Jun had been ambushed. To be honest, Luan Xiao felt very safe with Lu Yi as her companion. This was because if one of them was bullied, he would help you get back at them with interest. Lu Yi was silent for a moment before speaking again. There are more than 1 billion spirit jades here. I'm afraid 1 billion of them will be ours. Even if Z Jade was a top-tier spirit island, they wouldn't have stored 1 billion spirit jades in their treasure vault. It was possible to store a few 100 million spirit jades. The extra billion was probably the ransom that Lu Yi had sent over previously and was embezzled by Hu Guang. That day, Hu Guang took the ransom and didn't want to take it. Now he had the life to take it, but he didn't have the life to spend it. On the other hand, the three-world island had taken out 1 billion spirit jades. Who knew how many times they would get back? If Hu Guang knew this would happen, what would he think? The inventory of the treasure vault might take a few days. The spoils of war would also need to be reorganized and redistributed. This was because not everyone on the battlefield had the chance to kill the enemy and loot. For example, those medical cultivators were only responsible for saving the injured. Who would have the time to reap the spoils of war? However, their sacrifice shouldn't be forgotten. Therefore, all the spoils of war needed to be collected and redistributed. No matter what, after this battle, the already wealthy cultivators of the three-world island had become even richer. End of chapter. Chapter 1871. After such a great battle, there were many things that needed to be taken care of. However, the first thing to do was to return to Three-World Island and defend it. Three-World Island had mobilized all of its forces to attack Zixian. 5 Yu Yao were registered and 2,000 cultivators had arrived at Zixian through the Azure Sea Snail's door. It could be said that the Three-World Island was in a completely defenseless state. Although no one would dare to cause trouble on Three-World Island due to the might of this battle, there were still some things that needed to be taken precautions. In fact, When they realized that Three World Island had mobilized all of its forces to attack Zixian, there were already many factions that were ready to make trouble and secretly dispatched troops. This was because if Three World Island's attack on Zixian failed, and their losses were too great, they could immediately attack and take over Three World Island. Although there were still a few newly promoted Yu Yao guarding Three World Island, they hadn't been registered. Even if someone came to attack, they could only watch helplessly and not effectively resist. Of course, now that the Three World Island had won, and it was an unbelievably crushing victory, the other powers that had been itching to make a move had all given up. Half a day later, a central warship slowly rose from Zixian. 2 large warships accompanied it. The decks of these 3 warships were filled with berthed Tiger Shark warships. This was originally Zixian's huge fleet. A few days ago, it had aggressively attacked Three World Island. Now it had become spoils of war. 800 of the 2,000 cultivators, most of whom were injured, rode the 3 warships and arrogantly set off from Zixian. This scene caused the spectating cultivators to feel incomparably envious. Disregarding everything else, just that huge central warship was extremely valuable. The value of the entire fleet was difficult to estimate. However, what was strange was that the 3 warships didn't seem to be sailing toward Three World Island. No one knew where they were going. After more than half a day, the destination of the 3 warships was finally made clear. Giant Blade Island. It was actually Giant Blade Island. No one knew why. However, the 3 warships were indeed parked outside of Giant Blade Island. At this moment, on the central warship, a Jade Conch cultivator said, "Senior Marshal Brother Ma, why didn't we return to the main island? Why did we come here instead?" Ma Shangxi scratched his head. "I don't know." The questioning Yu Conch was confused. "You don't know? Then why did you bring us here?" Ma Shangxi continued. "Since Third Island Master has instructed us to do so, we'll just have to take a detour." He really didn't know why Lu Yi wanted him to wander around Giant Blade Island. This order was given by Lu Yi before he left Zixian, so he didn't ask. The Jade Conch cultivator couldn't help but have a pensive look on his face. He was naturally no stranger to Giant Blade Island. Last time, when they were fighting the 100 Yu, Giant Blade Island had intervened. As a result, the cultivators of the 3 realms had stopped in front of Giant Blade Island for a while on their way back. Then, Giant Blade Island had given them some spirit jade and other resources as compensation for breaking 3 realms' island's protective array. Only then had the cultivators of the 3 realms left. This time, he actually came to stay outside Giant Blade Island. Was it because of what happened last time? The Third Island Master was too vengeful. 3 battleships were stationed outside the island. Even though Three World Island had no intention of attacking, the entire Giant Blade Island was in chaos. Zhao Yunqi's face was extremely pale. As he listened to the reports of his subordinates, he couldn't help but recall what had happened a few days ago. Ma Shangxi didn't know why Lu Yi wanted him to stay here, but Zhao Yunqi knew very well. It was because on that day at Zixian's banquet, he had gloated over their misfortune and shouted that a murderer must pay with his life. At that time, he had been overjoyed and felt that Zixian was so powerful that Three World Island's sure way wasn't a match for her. In a moment of excitement, he had spoken without thinking. How could he have imagined that today's situation would occur? In fact, he was more concerned about Zixian's battle than anyone else. When he heard that Zixian's protective array had been broken, that Yu Yao had been killed one after another, and that Three World Island's cultivators had arrived at Zixian, he had almost fainted. He had hoped that Three World Island's Lu Yi wouldn't remember such a trivial matter. But now it seemed that the other party was truly vengeful and hadn't forgotten. She had just dealt with Zixian, and now the enemy was at the city gates. Fortunately, Three World Island had no intention of attacking Giant Blade Island. So Zhao Yunqi naturally knew what he had to do. Hurry up and check the treasury. Take out everything you have. He immediately ordered. Yu Yao couldn't help but widen her eyes. Senior Marshal Brother Zhao, why are you doing this? Zhao Yunqi scowled miserably. Pay to avoid disaster. Yu Yao said angrily. Our Giant Blade Island didn't provoke Three World Island this time. Why are they bullying us like this? Last time, Giant Blade Island had provoked them first. However, it was different this time. Why was Giant Blade Island the one who got hurt every time? Senior Martial Brother, this is intolerable. Let's fight it out with them. They didn't send many cultivators. And Yu Yao seems to be alone. They're no match for us. That's right. Three World Island is too arrogant. We definitely can't compromise this time. Please give the order, Senior Martial Brother. We pledge our lives to follow you. Amidst the clamor, Zhao Yunqi shouted angrily, "What's there to fight about? Do you think it's easy for our galaxy to occupy a high-grade spiritual island in the 10,000 Elephant Sea? That's the legacy of our ancestors. There really aren't that many cultivators from Three World Island outside. We might be able to win, but what happens after that? Everyone, the Violet Jade has been broken. Of all the people on the Moon Jade continent, only Lionheart managed to escape by hiding in the Island of Versatility. More than half of the star constellations are dead. That Lu Yi from the Island of Three Worlds is not human." When Lu Ye's name was mentioned, all of the Yu Yao cultivators' morale plummeted. The title of #1 cultivator under the sun was quite intimidating. That guy had killed Yu Yao like they were little chicks. They really couldn't understand how he could be so powerful. They were all Yu Yao. Zhao Yunqi's expression was full of guilt. Today's situation is my fault. When I went to Purple Jade's banquet that day, I said something wrong in a moment of anger. Three World Island's arrival was not without reason. Zhu Yueyao stared at Zhao Yunqi in shock. Only now did they understand the whole story. As for what Zhao Yunqi had said that day, there was no need to ask. He had definitely said something that had angered Lu Yi. "Let's take inventory of the treasuries," Zhao Yunqi said with a dispirited expression as he waved his hand. No one said anything else. Last time, Giant Blade Island had used up all of their wealth to force Three World Island to retreat. After that, the solar system had sent them a large amount of resources, which had finally resolved their desperate situation. Unexpectedly, however, they were forced to tighten their belts again after just a few days of peace. The Yu Yao cultivators were exasperated. Just go and attend the banquet. Eating and drinking was one thing, but no one would treat you as a mute if you talked too much. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Zhao Yunqi led a group of cultivators out of Giant Blade Island and landed on the central battleship with a smile on his face. "Who are you?" Ma Shangxi barked. Zhao Yunqi hurriedly introduced himself. Ma Shangxi frowned. "What is it?" Zhao Yunqi waved his hand, and the cultivators behind him began to move and carry, piling countless resources in front of Ma Shangxi. Very quickly, a small mountain of resources had been piled up. The reason why they didn't use storage rings was because that would be more impactful and show Giant Blade Island's attitude. Ma Shangxi was confused. He couldn't understand what was going on. Zhao Yunqi cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, you must be tired from the journey. Since you are passing by this island is willing to offer some resources as a host. I hope that fellow Taoists won't mind." Ma Shangxi was dumbfounded. He secretly thought to himself, how could there be such a good thing? Staying outside a spiritual island for a while would give him such benefits. If he could visit the other major spiritual islands, wouldn't he become the richest person in the world? Moreover, wasn't the things Giant Blade Island was giving out a bit too much? Although he didn't count them carefully, he roughly knew the value of these resources with just a glance. There must be a demon behind this abnormality. Ma Shangxi pondered for a moment and said, "Wait a moment." He immediately sent a message to Lu Yi. Soon he received a reply. Ma Shangxi roughly understood the situation. He looked at Zhao Yunqi indifferently and truthfully conveyed Lu Ye's words. "Island Master Zhao, you can do it twice but not thrice. If there is a next time, the fate of your island will be unknown." Zhao Yunqi let out a long breath, knowing that he had passed this hurdle. He immediately nodded and said, "This Zhao understands. There definitely won't be a next time." Ma Shangxi nodded and raised his hand to order. "Return to the island." After a short while, the 3 warships returned with a full load. Zhao Yunqi led a group of Giant Blade Island cultivators behind and shouted, "Farewell, fellow Taoists." After a long time, he raised his head, and looked at the 3 warships that were gradually disappearing into the distance. His face was full of annoyance. With one sentence, he had caused Giant Blade Island to lose tens of millions of spirit jades. He wished he could slap himself a few times. He turned his head and looked at Yu Yao in a daze. Junior Marshal Brother returned to the star system again and asked for material support. When Yu Yao heard this, his expression immediately became uncomfortable, as if he had eaten shit. Last time, he had gone back to ask for material support. As a result, he had been reprimanded by Rizhao. Why was it him again this time? Inside Purple Jade Island, Lu Yi put away the sound talisman and ended the communication with Ma Shangxi. He didn't plan to exterminate Giant Blade Island. There was no need to do so, not to mention that the 3-world island had defeated Purple Jade. Their cultivators were physically and mentally exhausted, and many of them were injured and needed to recuperate. Moreover, what good would conquering Giant Blade Island do? Conquering Purple Jade was enough to make the various forces in the Myriad Sea fear the 3-world island. If they attacked Giant Blade Island without stopping, it would only make people think that the 3-world island was arrogant and despotic. Moreover, that day, Zhao Yunqi had only agreed with a few words of indignation. He hadn't done anything to harm the 3-world island's interests. That was why he had Ma Shangxi lead the fleet outside Giant Blade Island. Zhao Yunqi was a smart person and naturally knew what to do. Now that the other party had lost money to avoid disaster and apologized, the matter was over. Feng Wujiang flew over and shouted to Lu Yi, "Junior Marshal Brother, we found the entrance to the Spirit Jade Mine. Let's go take a look." Lu Yi immediately became spirited and flew towards the entrance of the Spirit Jade Mine with his senior marshal brother. End of chapter. Chapter 1872. After a short while, Lu Yi walked around the Spirit Jade Mine. Purple Jade was a top-grade spirit island, so of course it had its own Spirit Jade Mine. This was also the symbol of a top-grade spirit island. This was not the first time he had entered a Spirit Jade Mine. He had investigated the mine in the core of Fengsun Mountain before. He had also seen the Mermaid Tribe's Spirit Jade Mine countless times. Spirit Jade veins were called veins, but they were not the same as real veins. Normal veins had many derivatives and accompanying creatures, and it was quite troublesome to mine them. Those derivatives had to be removed, and the purity of the mined ores varied. Some methods had to be used to purify the ores needed to be used. However, that was not the case for Spirit Jade mines. The formation of Spirit Jade was the condensation of the starry sky energy. When it reached a certain limit, the starry sky energy would condense into Spirit Jade. Therefore, every top-grade Spirit Island's Spirit Jade mine was the place with the densest energy. Cultivators could carve out grooves of suitable sizes within the ore vein in advance. Next, they only needed to wait quietly, and the many grooves would condense out Spirit Jades. Then, they could harvest them at the right time. Naturally, they could also do as they pleased without affecting the ore vein too much. In a special place like the Wanxiang Sea, it could be said that the Wanxiang Sea would never dry up. The Spirit Jade veins of all the top Spirit Islands were inexhaustible. This was because, fundamentally speaking, the Spirit Jades that were harvested were condensed from the dissipated energy of the Wanxiang Sea. The scale of the Spirit Jade mine on Purple Jade Island was quite good. However, compared to the mine in the core of Fengsun Mountain, it was still slightly lacking. When Lu Yi arrived, Wan Xiaoa, He Baichuan, and Yin Miao had already arrived. They were looking around excitedly. This was undoubtedly the first time Wan Xiaoa and Yin Miao had entered a Spirit Jade mine. They were very surprised. Yin Miao, on the other hand, had seen this many times. The Spirit Jade mine in the Mermaid Tribe's territory was much larger than this one. Apart from the three of them, many other star constellations who had heard the news came to watch the show. Everyone was from a place like the Jade Snail Galaxy. When had they ever seen something as rare as a Spirit Jade mine? Sensing Lu Ye's aura, Wan Xiaoa turned and waved at him. "Junior brother, over here." Lu Yi walked over and looked around. He said, "Grand Elder, how is the production of the Spirit Jade mine?" Yin Miao was undoubtedly the one who knew the most about the Spirit Jade mine, so they could only ask her about this matter. Yin Miao had already looked at it for a while, and already had an estimate. He said, about 30 million a year. 30 million spiritual jades? He Baichuan asked. That's right. Miao Yin nodded. Not much. He Baichuan curled his lips, his interest greatly dampened. He had thought that this kind of spirit jade mine would have a high yield, but it turned out that it only produced 30 million spirit jades a year. Three World Islands' annual income was much higher than this. In comparison, this spirit jade mine was valuable, but it didn't seem to be very valuable. Luan Xiao couldn't help but glare at He Baichuan. You've only been living a comfortable life for a few days, and you've already forgotten the hardships of the past? Isn't 30 million a lot? It's free money. 30 million spirit jades was not a small amount for any cultivator under the sun. It was enough to buy an 8-star transcendent artifact, and still have some left over. And this is just a year's worth of profit. Zixian has been here for tens of thousands of years. Think about how many benefits they have taken from here. He Baichuan smiled awkwardly. I'm just saying. Speaking of which, if it weren't for the Three-World Island, 30 million spirit jades would be a huge sum for the cultivators of the Three-World Island. For example, when Lu Yi turned the tide and helped the Four-Way Galaxy defeat the allied forces of the Insect and Blood clans, the Four-Way Galaxy only gave him 20 million spirit jades as a thank-you gift. It wasn't that the Four-Way Galaxy was stingy, but that their reserves were limited, and they couldn't take out that much. Last time, when Three-World Island extorted Giant Blade Island, the total value of the spirit jades and resources they gave was also about 20 to 30 million spirit jades. Therefore, 30 million spirit jades a year was definitely not a small amount. However, when He Baichuan compared this number to the Three-World Island's current income, it didn't seem much. On the other hand, Zixian had been here for tens of thousands of years. It was hard to imagine how much they had benefited from it. The huge amount of spirit jades had helped them cultivate many cultivators. The most important thing was that he had picked it up for free. To a top-grade spirit island, the spirit jade mineral vein was important but not essential. This was because every force that occupied a top-grade spirit island had a top-grade realm behind them. They themselves had spirit jade mineral veins in their realm, and the scale was definitely bigger than the one in the Wanxiang Sea. To the forces that came from the top-grade realms, the spirit island itself was the place that they valued. This was because the spirit island had a special cultivation environment that no other realm could have. Therefore, the spirit jade mineral vein here wasn't the goal of the top-grade forces. It was just a side benefit. Suddenly, there were sounds of discussion. Many star mansions gathered to watch. Soon someone shouted, "Senior brothers and sisters, there are spirit crystals here." Lu Yi and the others looked in the direction of the voice and walked over. Indeed, they saw spirit crystals here. Why is the arrangement of these spirit crystals so strange? He Baichuan glanced at it with a puzzled expression. In his opinion, the spirit crystals here were arranged radially from a certain point. The closer they were to the center, the brighter the spirit crystals would be. Conversely, the spirit crystals would be dimmer. Further out, they would gradually become low-grade spirit jades. The source of the vein. Yen Miao said slowly. What? He Baichuan looked at him in confusion. The source of the spirit jade mineral vein is the source of the vein. This is something that cannot be detected by the naked eye, or even by spiritual force. It is because of the source of the vein that the energy in the universe gathers towards the source of the vein and condenses into spirit jades. The closer it is to the source of the vein, the easier it is for spirit crystals to form. Yen Miao explained, a spirit jade mineral vein has more than one source of vein. Look around. There should be other sources. The cultivators of the Three-World Island immediately looked around. As expected, they found more sources of vein. There were about 10 source points in the entire spirit jade mineral vein. They ran through the entire mineral vein from the beginning to the end. Lu Yi tried to use his spiritual force to sense them. Indeed, he could not detect anything strange. The source of the vein was invisible and could not be detected. However, the fact that spirit crystals formed near the source of the vein was undoubtedly the best evidence. The cultivators of the Three-World Island watched the commotion in the spirit jade mineral vein for a while before they started harvesting. The condensation of spirit jades and spirit crystals was like the growth of a fruit. As the energy in the universe continued to gather, the fruit would gradually grow larger and fuller. If this was their own spirit jade mineral vein, they would naturally wait for the fruit to ripen before harvesting it. However, this was a mineral vein that they had obtained from war. The cultivators of the three-world island were not so particular. They did not care if the fruit was ripe or not. They just harvested everything first. Although the spirit jades and spirit crystals that had not fully condensed were small in size, they would not hinder their cultivation. Before they could finish their work, they heard that Tang Jun had arrived. Including him, the other Yu Yaos were all shocked when they heard this. They hurriedly walked out. From afar they saw Tang Jun looking around. Lu Yi hurried over. Did something happen on the island? Tang Jun shook his head. No. Then why did you come here? Lu Yi said in annoyance. Thinking about it, if something had happened on the island, Tang Jun would definitely send a message over immediately. He would not come here personally. I have something to discuss. Tang Jun's expression turned serious. Something big. Lu Yi blinked. He seemed to have realized something. He said, let's find a place to talk. After a short while, the Yu Yaos of the three-world island took their seats in a large hall on Purple Jade Island. The hall was quite majestic. The overall style was also very rough. It was the style of the Yao tribe. After everyone was seated, Tang Jun said, before we talk, tell me, Yi, do you want this Purple Jade Island or not? Lu Yi thought to himself. It was just as he had guessed. Otherwise, Tang Jun would not have asked such a question. Although he already had some insight, he still asked, so what if I want it? So what if I don't? Tang Jun remained calm. You have to say what you want, not what you don't want. If we say we want it, then according to the rules of the myriad phenomenon C, the same force cannot occupy two spirit islands. Therefore, we have to move from the three-world island to Purple Jade. We have to give up on the three-world island. Of course, we can also split up. After all, we are three realms united. If one realm occupies Purple Jade, then the rules will make sense. He Baichuan said. How can we give up on the three-world island? Although the three-world island was a high-class spirit island and Purple Jade was a top-class spirit island, if he had to choose, he would definitely choose the three-world island and not Purple Jade. The only thing better about Purple Jade than the three-world island was that the cultivation environment was much better. However, in the entire myriad phenomenon C, how many spirit islands could compare to the three-world island's ability to accumulate wealth? What the cultivators of the three-world lacked now was not a cultivation environment. Their own islands were definitely sufficient. Anything better would not be of much help. What the cultivators of the three-world needed most was to earn more spirit jades. This was because everyone had their own realm behind them. They had a huge desire for spirit jades and cultivation resources. Tang Jun nodded and said, yes, I also feel that we cannot give up on the three-world island. If we want Purple Jade, then we can only split up. One or two realms can occupy Purple Jade. No. He Baichuan immediately shook his head. When the cultivators of the three-world island were united, their overall strength was not very strong. After splitting up, there was no need to talk about them. They did not have the qualifications to occupy a top-class spirit island. Now they were able to occupy the three-world island stably. Firstly, it was because of their reputation from conquering Baiwa. Secondly, it was because of Che Ling Realm's secret support. Lu Ye's role in this was irreplaceable. Without him, whether it was the three-world island or Purple Jade, no one on their side could stand firm. Hence, splitting up was useless. When the time came, whichever side Lu Yi was on would be stable. As for the other side, it would definitely be coveted by countless forces. Wan Xiao said slowly, I thought about this before. If Purple Jade is conquered, I'm afraid we won't be able to occupy it. Hence, I'm afraid we can't take Purple Jade. End of chapter. Chapter 1873. This was undoubtedly a happy problem. There were many factions in the Vientiane Sea, but there were only so many spiritual islands. Many factions did not have a place to settle down, and could only wander around. If they were lucky, they could find a deserted island to settle down temporarily. If they were unlucky, they would be homeless. However, when it came to the three-world island, the situation was different. Back then, they conquered Baiwe and secretly gave it to Four Corner Island. Now that they had conquered Zixian, they could not even take it. We can't take Zixian. We can confirm this, right? Tang Jun looked at everyone. Everyone nodded. Actually, even if Tang Jun did not mention this, Wan Xiao would have gathered Yu Yao to discuss how to deal with Zixian. Now it seemed like they had agreed not to take Zixian. If we don't want Zixian, how should we deal with it? Yi Baichuan asked. It was not easy to conquer such a top-grade spiritual island. They could not just lose it. If they did, someone would definitely come and take it. It was a great benefit. Auction? Yen Miao suggested. Just like how we auctioned off Baiwe. We should be able to sell it for a good price. Although this method works, I am afraid no one would dare to take it, Wan Xiao said. After all, Zixian was a spiritual island occupied by a top-grade faction. Although it had been conquered by the three-world island, it was not something that anyone could covet. This top-grade spiritual island was different from Baiwe. Back then, countless factions fought over Baiwe and competed with each other during the auction. However, no one dared to take over Zixian. This was because once they did, they would definitely stand against Zixian. If Zixian lost her spiritual island, she would definitely think of a way to get it back. Take Four Corner Island for example. The Baiwe Galaxy had been eyeing Four Corner Island covetously. They wanted to take back control of Four Corner Island. However, Four Corner Island was not weak. The Baiwe Galaxy could not do anything. However, Zixian was different. If they did not have any backing, they would not dare to have any ideas. This might be a hot potato. Wrong. Tang Jun smiled. There are indeed people who are interested in Zixian. What news did you get? Lu Yi looked at him and asked. Tang Jun said. After you conquered Zixian, someone sent a message saying that they want to take over Zixian. They want us to offer a reasonable price. There are not many people, but there are 4 or 5 factions. Lu Yi asked curiously, who is so bold? Tang Jun said. In a place without rules, I'm afraid no one would dare to disregard Zixian's reputation. However, this is the Wanxiangxi after all. Although Zixian's reputation is great, the rule that only the 5 registered Yu Yao are qualified to participate in the Battle of the Spiritual Islands means that Zixian won't cause too much trouble in the vast Wanxiangxi. After those forces take over Zixian, as long as they properly fortify their defenses, it won't be that easy for Zixian to deploy troops to take them down. As long as they can hold on for a period of time and wait for the defensive formation to become more stable, they will be able to gain a firm foothold. Therefore, this has nothing to do with courage. Zixian is indeed a top-level domain, but the universe is vast. Some large domains have very strong foundations. Lu Yi understood. It was not that those who had secretly contacted Tang Jun and wanted to stay in Zixian were not unafraid of Zixian. It was just that the rules of the Wanxiangxi had greatly restricted Zixian. Even if Zixian had great strength, there was a limit to what it could do on the Wanxiangxi. Therefore, it was worth the risk. Moreover, they had a certain level of confidence. If they missed this opportunity, they might not be able to wait for the next opportunity in their lifetime. Naturally, someone would take action. Although 4 or 5 isn't much, we should be able to sell it for a good price. Yi Baichuan nodded. We can sell it. Wan Xiao pondered for a moment. She was also tempted. Under the premise that the cultivators of the 3 realms could not take over Zixian, selling it was indeed the only choice. Everyone turned to look at Lu Yi. Although Lu Yi was only the 3rd island master in name, he had played a decisive role in the development of the 3 realms island over the years. He was also the one who led and resolved all the difficulties that the island faced. If not for him, Zixian would not have been able to take it down. Therefore, it was up to him to decide what to do in the end. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi said, we definitely have to sell it. I already have a suitable buyer in mind. Moreover, I believe that they will give us a very high price. Wan Xiao was stunned. Who? She did not see Lu Yi contact anyone. How did he find a suitable buyer? Lu Yi shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this first. Old Tang, you didn't rush over here just to discuss the ownership of Zixian, right? Is there something else going on here?" If it was just to discuss the ownership of Zixian, it could have been delayed. However, Tang Jun had rushed over directly. There was no doubt that something was wrong. Tang Jun smiled and said, "You're so smart. Since you've figured it out, I won't keep you in suspense. It's like this. Not long after you killed Lionheart outside the island of Versatility, a guest came to the Three Realms Island. It was Taoist Yu from the Ling realm. She passed by the Three Realms Island and went to see that brat Chu Shun. After she left, Chu Shun came to find me and said something." "What?" He Baichuan asked curiously. Tang Jun said, "You can think of a way to sell Zixian Island back to the Zixian Demon Star." He Baichuan was stunned and looked confused. "What kind of logic is that? It wasn't easy for us to conquer it. If we sell it back, wouldn't it be a waste of our efforts?" Tang Jun nodded and said, "Yes, when I heard this, I also had the same thought. However, what Chu Shun said to me was obviously Taoist Yu's advice. Taoist Yu is a cultivator from the Ling realm, so she can't have any direct contact with us. That's why she asked Chu Shun to pass on the message." After a pause, Tang Jun continued, "Thinking deeper, could Taoist Yu's meaning be the same as that of the Ling realm? If that's the case, then it's very profound." It was impossible to guess Ri Guang's thoughts, but no one dared to ignore it. "That's why I've been thinking along the way. What's the meaning behind this? We destroyed Zixian Island and killed so many Zixian Demon Star cultivators. Even if we sell it back to them, it won't resolve this grudge. If that's the case, why should we sell it back to Zixian?" Tang Jun showed a distressed expression. He Baichuan asked, "Have you thought it through?" Tang Jun chuckled and did not answer. Instead, he looked at Lu Yi. "Who's the suitable person you're talking about?" Lu Yi said calmly, "Zixian Demon Star." Tang Jun pointed at him and clapped his hands. "See, he's thought it through." He Baichuan felt a headache coming. "Don't beat around the bush. Tell me, what are you guys thinking?" Tang Jun smiled and said, "It's very simple. If Zixian wants to sell it, then it must be sold at a high price. Of course, the few forces who are interested will not offer a low price. However, only by selling it to Zixian can it be sold at the highest price. To Zixian, buying back this spiritual island is not just about making a deal. They want to buy face." At this point, Tang Jun sighed. A top force losing a spiritual island in the Vientiane Sea is something that has never happened before. If Zixian doesn't buy back the spiritual island, they will be the only top force without a top-notch spiritual island from today onwards. They will become the subject of discussion at all times. The reputation of a top force is so precious that it can't be bought with money. Hence, by selling it to Zixian, we will have the absolute advantage. We can name whatever price we want and as much as we want. After hearing Tang Jun's explanation, He Baichuan was enlightened. Yes, the spiritual island had a price, but face was priceless. In order to get back the spiritual island, as long as the price offered by the three-world island was not too outrageous, Zixian Demon Star would accept it. Most importantly, in terms of wealth, which force could be compared to a top force? The benefits of selling it to others were definitely not as good as selling it back to Zixian Demon Star. This was the best target to sell Zixian to. Jiu Yin must have seen through this, which was why she instructed Aunt Yu to make a trip to the three-world island and pass on this idea to Chu Shun. Tang Jun did not expect Lu Yi to have the same idea as Jiu Yin. Therefore, even if he did not make this trip, Lu Yi would have already made a decision. Will Zixian buy it? He Baichuan asked. Tang Jun said, "Don't worry about that. Zixian will definitely buy it. Once the news reaches Zixian Demon Star, someone will not be able to sit still." As he spoke, he stood up and said, "All right, if I knew that you had already made a decision, I would not have made this trip. You guys go ahead. I will make a move first." Tang Jun left. After a few days, the cultivators of the three-world island left one after another. The huge top-grade spiritual island had become an empty island without a master in an instant. Originally, Luan Xiao wanted to set up a simple defensive array here and leave some cultivators of the three-world island to guard it. However, she gave up after Lu Ye's persuasion. Yuan Du hated him to the core, so it was best for the three-world island to be more careful. They did not want to give Yuan Du any information that could be used against them. If they divided their forces to occupy Zixian, it would undoubtedly break the rule that no one force could occupy two spiritual islands on the Wanxiang Sea. At that time, Yuan Du would use this as an excuse to make a fuss. Even if he killed the cultivators of the three-world island, Lu Yi could only watch helplessly. The cultivators of the three realms retreated. Anything of value on Violet Jade Island had been taken away, with the exception of the Spirit Jade Mine. Even so, no power dared to casually occupy it. After all, if the Three Realms Island had the ability to destroy Violet Jade when it was at its peak, then they had the ability to destroy Violet Jade in its current state. No matter who came to occupy Zixian, they would definitely encounter the enmity of the Three-World Island. Once they were attacked, things would not end well. All the major forces on the 10,000 Elephant Sea were well aware of this. Therefore, although they were envious, they could only restrain themselves. The few forces that were interested in buying Zixian had been in frequent contact with Tang Jun these days. Even though Tang Jun had clearly rejected them, they still couldn't resist their enthusiasm. Recently, Lao Tang could be said to be enjoying himself every night. Although he was old, he was still strong and vigorous. He was very distressed. The fierce battle thus came to an end. The shock this battle brought to the cultivators of the Wanxiang Sea was far greater than the previous attack by the Three-World Island. This was the first top spiritual island to be conquered in the history of the Wanxiang Sea. The Three-World Island once again proved its powerful and terrifying foundation. Among them, the third island master of the Three-World Island, Lu Yi, had solidified the title of the strongest person under the sun. End of chapter. Chapter 1874. In the Three-World Island, Lu Yi and Chu Xin sat opposite each other in his bamboo house. There were a few dishes and 2 bottles of wine on the table. They were drinking and chatting happily. After retreating from Zixian yesterday, Lu Yi brought the minor constellation hall back with him. He readjusted the power of this treasure and placed it under the Three-World Island. It had only been half a month since he placed the minor constellation hall under Zixian Island. Hence, even though there was some impact on the Three-World Island, it was not significant. Many people did not even realize that there were many changes in the Three-World Island. Today Lu Yi invited Chu Xin to a banquet. He did not pay much attention to it. The two of them ate and chatted casually. He did not even thank Chu Xin. He remembered some things and did not need to express it. Chu Xin did not mention it either. However, Lu Yi knew that Jiuyan's appearance on the all-encompassing island was not a coincidence. There were no such coincidences in this world. If there was anyone in this world who could invite Jiuyan, it would be Chu Xin. How long will it take for you to complete the constellation? Lu Yi threw a nut into his mouth and asked casually. Chu Xin chuckled. Soon, within 2 or 3 years. Ever since he came to the Three-World Island, Chu Xin had been living in seclusion. He cultivated in seclusion all year round. His talent was outstanding. In addition to the excellent cultivation environment on the Three-World Island, he did not lack cultivation resources. Hence, his cultivation progressed very quickly. Back then, he was not like this. He was young and unruly, and would run away from home at the slightest provocation. However, ever since he lost the matchless island, Chu Xin realized the importance of his own strength. Only then was he able to calm down and work hard. A cultivator's path of growth would always be filled with obstacles. Everyone was like that. It was these obstacles that allowed one to become more mature. Chu Xin aside, in the Three-World Island, the first batch of 9 continents constellations that came with Lu Yi had already reached the late-stage constellation realm. Their cultivation and strength had greatly improved compared to when they first came to the myriad phenomenon sea. Lu Yi nodded. I am preparing to go to the carriage bell boundary. What do you think I should bring? Jiuyan helped him resolve such a huge crisis. Back then, Lu Yi could not express his gratitude. Furthermore, the battle for the spiritual island was still ongoing. Hence, he immediately rushed back to Zixian Island. Now that everything was settled, it was time to pay a visit to Che Ling Jia and thank Jiuyan in person. It wouldn't be nice to go empty-handed, so Lu Yi thought that he should bring some gifts. But what could possibly pique Rizhao's interest? Lu Yi thought about it and decided that he had to consult Chu Shun on this matter. After all, no one knew his mother better than him. There's no need to bring them. Big brother, just go. When the time comes, I will accompany big brother. Chu Shun waved his hand. I need to bring them. Give me some ideas. Lu Yi insisted. Chu Shun was just being polite when he said that he didn't need to bring anything. Naturally, he couldn't really go there without bringing anything. Does Senior Jiuyan have any special preferences? Chu Shun scratched his head. I really don't know. I've never seen mother like anything. Think about it carefully. You're the son of Jiuyan after all. How could you not know what your mother likes? Chu Shun thought hard for a while, and suddenly his eyes lit up. Lu Yi immediately looked at him expectantly. Why don't you find a Dao companion for my mother, big brother? My mother has been alone all her life. She should have someone by her side. The corner of Lu Ye's mouth twitched. This was really a filial son. How could he say something like that? Moreover, where could he find a Dao companion for Jiuyan? Jiuyan was Rizhao. Only Rizhao was worthy of her. Soon, he felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, If Senior Jiuyan has been alone all her life, where did you come from? Chu Shun laughed. I was picked up by mother. Mother and I are not biological mother and son. Lu Yi couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. He had always thought that Chu Shun and Jiuyan were biological mother and son. Who knew that they weren't? Chu Shun definitely wouldn't joke about this kind of thing. According to her, a few decades ago, when she was traveling through a certain domain, she saw me, who was still in swaddling clothes, being placed on a wooden basin. Following the river, there were jackals and wolves on both sides of the river, eyeing me covetously. If no one paid attention to me, I would either drown or be eaten by those jackals and wolves. She couldn't bear it, and brought me back, taking good care of me. The origin of my name is because that domain has the word Shun, and the place where my mother found me was a small country called Chu, so my mother named me Chu Shun. Lu Yi blinked. I thought you took your father's surname. Chu Shun smiled. I don't even know who my father is. At this point, Chu Shun suddenly said, Big brother, if you insist on bringing a gift, why don't you give it to Aunt Yu? Mother probably doesn't want anything else, so she won't care about anything. However, if you give it to Aunt Yu, the effect will be the same. Lu Yi asked, Then what does Aunt Yu like? Chu Shun thought for a moment and said, From what I know, Aunt Yu has a chance of breaking through to Rizhao. The soul refining pill should be good. Oh right, a few years ago, Aunt Yu seemed to be looking for treasures that can improve the quality of her spiritual source. I wonder if she found any. When he said this, Lu Yi had a plan in mind. Indeed, for a PQ Yao like Aunt Yu, a top-grade soul-refining pill was undoubtedly a good gift. The top-grade soul-refining pill of the Three-World Island was now a signature item. In the vast Wanxiang Sea, countless PQ Yao had their eyes on it. Although it was not difficult for the island to refine this pill, with the pill gourd, in theory, as long as they had enough raw materials, they could refine it without limit. However, they could not supply it without limit. Firstly, it would attract unwanted attention, and secondly, it would delay Shui Yuan's cultivation. Especially after the Three-World Island had gotten on the right track in recent years. Shui Yuan's main purpose of using the pill furnace to refine pills was to satisfy the cultivation needs of her own cultivators. As for selling them, that was secondary, because the Three-World Island no longer relied on selling pills to earn spirit jades. Also, with the addition of the flower tribe, they could refine normal pills, and their quality was not bad. However, if they wanted to refine top-grade pills, it would depend on luck. Therefore, there was only one way for the Three-World Island to sell top-grade soul-refining pills to the outside world. The Rainbow Chamber of Commerce's annual auction. Every time the auction was held, a large number of Wuxia would come. Any bottle of top-grade soul-refining pills would be sold at a very high price. Every year, this was the busiest time for the three-world island. The pills were sold in limited quantities to the outside world. But if Lu Yi wanted them, wouldn't it be easy? He could just take whatever he wanted. As for treasures that could increase the quality of one's spiritual source, it was a bitter matter. Lu Yi had asked the Myriad Elephant Chamber of Commerce to keep an eye out for such treasures several years ago, but there had been no news from them so far. Violet Jade Island's huge treasury did not have such treasures. Instead, he found one in Hu Guang's storage ring. It should be Hu Guang's personal item. Lu Yi had planned to refine it in a few days to increase the quality of his spiritual source. That way, his cultivation efficiency should increase slightly. Now it seemed that there was no need to refine it. He could just give it to Aunt Yu as a gift. Although the treasure was precious, if Juyin had not appeared that day, it would have been difficult to resolve the matter. If the three-world island wanted to develop on the Myriad Elephant Sea in the future, it could not do without the protection of the Che Ling realm. The next day, Lu Yi brought the gifts and set off with Chu Shun. They left the Myriad Elephant Sea and headed in the direction of the Che Ling realm. The journey was smooth and uneventful. Chu Shun had not returned to the Che Ling realm for many years, so he was rather excited along the way. When they arrived at the Che Ling realm, there was no need to say anything. Under Chu Shun's lead, they directly entered the realm. The Thousand Sunset sect on the Thousand Sunset Mountain was the largest sect in the Che Ling realm. It was also Juyin's sect. When Chu Shun and Lu Yi arrived, Aunt Yu was already waiting in front of a large hall. Clearly, she had sensed Chu Shun's return. "Aunt Yu!" Chu Shun shouted and stepped forward to greet her. "It's rare that you still have the heart to come back." Aunt Yu pursed her lips and smiled. "I thought you would never want to come back after leaving the Che Ling realm." Chu Shun's expression turned bitter. "Haven't I been so engrossed in cultivation that I completely forgot about myself? I was young and ignorant in the past, causing Mother and Aunt Yu to worry. Now that I've grown up, I know that home is where I belong." Aunt Yu blinked, somewhat gratified. Shen'er has really grown up. She looked up at Lu Yi behind Chu Shun. Lu Yi hurriedly bowed. "Aunt Yu." Since Chu Shun called him Big Brother, he naturally followed suit. Although their cultivations were about the same, Aunt Yu was indeed much older. Aunt Yu was stunned for a moment. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. In the past, Lu Yi had called her fellow Taoist. Now she couldn't call Lu Yi by his name. They weren't familiar with this place yet. She could only nod. Island Master Lu, the #1 person under the sun. Even she didn't dare to ignore this title. It was a title that had been earned through real killing. "Aunt Yu, this is Big Brother's gift for you." Chu Shun hurriedly handed over a storage ring that he had prepared in advance. Aunt Yu smiled. "Since you're here, there's no need to bring a gift." Although she said this, she didn't refuse and reached out to take the ring. She casually checked it, and her eyes lit up. "You're very thoughtful." Not to mention how rare treasures that could increase the quality of one's source of origin were. Just the top-grade soul-refining pill was indeed what she needed the most right now. It could be said that Lu Ye's gift was exactly what she wanted. Seeing this, Lu Yi secretly sighed in relief. Aunt Yu accepting the gift undoubtedly showed her attitude, and didn't treat him as an outsider. But then again, if she really treated him as an outsider, Jiu Yin wouldn't have appeared on the island of versatility that day, and Aunt Yu wouldn't have specially made a trip to the three-world island. "Where's Mother?" Chu Shun didn't see Jiu Yin and asked. "She's inside." Aunt Yu smiled. "Mother!" Chu Shun shouted and rushed into the main hall. He looked very much like a young daughter-in-law, returning to her mother's home. "Island Master Lu, please come in." Aunt Yu gestured with her hand. "Thank you for your trouble," Lu Yi said. He followed behind Aunt Yu and walked into the hall. Chapter 1875. Lu Ye's expression immediately turned solemn. He cupped his fists and bowed. "Lu Yi of the Island of the Three Realms greets Senior Jiuyan." The hall was silent. Chu Shun stopped talking. Aunt Yu stood quietly by his side. Jiuyan didn't say anything. However, Lu Yi could sense that someone was staring at him. Strangely, for some reason, this gaze made him feel uncomfortable. It was as if someone who hated him was staring coldly at him. He couldn't help but frown. Juyin hated him? That didn't seem very likely. Up until now, he had only seen Juyin once outside the island of versatility a few days ago. Where did this hatred come from? It couldn't be because of Chu Shun. But it didn't seem right to say that it was just his imagination. Just as he was thinking, Juyin's voice came from the front. No need for formalities. That feeling suddenly disappeared without a trace. Have a seat, Juyin said again. Lu Yi sat quietly to the side. A female cultivator entered the room and served him tea. Lu Yi took a sip of the tea and placed it down. He then turned toward Jiuyan and said, "Senior, I'm sorry for taking the liberty to come here. I would like to thank you for what happened outside the island of versatility a few days ago." Before Lu Yi could finish, Juyin interrupted him. What happened outside the island of versatility was just a coincidence. I was visiting an old friend, and happened to pass by when I was about to leave. The old friend she was talking about was undoubtedly Mu Qing. However, when Lu Yi observed Jiuyan and Mu Qing's expressions that day, he didn't see any deep friendship between Jiuyan and Mu Qing. But since she said so, Lu Yi couldn't bring it up again. Jiuyan was the sunshine of the Wanxiang Galaxy. Yuan Du was also the sunshine of the Wanxiang Galaxy. In the end, Lu Yi was just an outsider. Jiuyan helping Lu Yi against Yuan Du was equivalent to sunshine of the Wanxiang Galaxy fighting against his own family for an outsider. Some things were better said than done, and some things could be done but not said. Of course Lu Yi knew this. Since Shun calls you big brother, this queen will not treat you as an outsider. Both you and Shun are young and impetuous, so it is inevitable that you will be rash and impetuous in your actions. Although it is too late to say these things now, you really should not have killed Hu Shui that day. You should know the relationship between Hu Shui and Yuan Du with your strength. Even if Hu Shui can control the battle arena, you should be able to protect yourself. You should let her know the difference in strength between you two, and force her to voluntarily release the shackles of the battle arena. Senior is right. Lu Yi nodded. Actually, when I was trapped in the battle arena that day, I had no intention of killing her. It was just that some of her actions forced me to kill her. What did she do? Aunt Yu asked curiously. Lu Yi thought for a moment, and felt that there was nothing he couldn't say, so he went straight to the point. That day on the battle stage, Hu Shui wasn't my match. I forced her to release the seal, but she ended up tearing her clothes apart. Under such circumstances, if she suddenly released the seal again, with Yuan Du by her side, I wouldn't be able to explain myself even if I had 10,000 mouths. So I could only kill her, destroy her body, and destroy all evidence. So explosive? Chu Shun's eyes widened when he heard this. Thinking about it, in the middle of a life and death battle, the other party suddenly treated him with sincerity. This scene was really ridiculous. Aunt Yu frowned and couldn't help scolding. How shameless. Although Jiuyan didn't say anything, it was obvious that he had the same thought. He nodded and said, "If that's the case, then killing her was indeed the best response." Then he changed the topic. "But I heard that Hu Shui is a heavenly beauty, and even Yuan Du dotes on her. Her life is in your hands, so she will definitely beg for mercy. Aren't you the least bit tempted?" Lu Yi lowered his eyes. "In a battle, under my long saber, either the enemy dies or I die. Whether she's beautiful or ugly, it's all the same to me." Jiuyan nodded slightly and turned to look at Chu Shun. "Learn from your big brother. You still have a long way to go in the future. Sooner or later, you will encounter trouble with beauty. You must not destroy yourself because of compassion." "Yes," Chu Shun hurriedly responded. He then turned his head and winked at Lu Yi. His face was full of admiration for Lu Yi as his big brother. Jiuyan asked again, "What are you going to do with Zixian?" Lu Yi replied honestly, "Although several forces have contacted us, wanting to occupy Zixian, this island has no intention to agree. Zixian has not been dealt with for the time being, and no one dares to easily occupy it. Just wait, it won't be long before someone comes to contact you." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. "Senior, are you referring to Zixian Demon Star?" Jiu Yan nodded and said, and it's probably Rizhao who will come to deal with this matter personally. Although Lu Yi had expected this, when he heard Jiu Yan's judgment, he still felt a little unconfident. If Rizhao comes, then our three-world island is not qualified to talk to him on an equal footing. If the other party uses force. Aunt Yu coldly snorted and said, in this vast 10,000 elephant sea, even if a dragon comes, it will have to coil up. If Rizhao comes, you can talk to him. Unless he has the courage to break the rules, he will have to act according to the rules. There's nothing to be afraid of. Lu Yi understood. This time, he came to Chailing Boundary not only to express his gratitude, but also because of this matter. He speculated that Zixian would definitely send a powerful expert to deal with the matter of Zixian Island. He could not count on Lionheart, which meant that he could not count on the entire Yu Yao faction. Therefore, Zixian would most likely send a powerful expert from Zixian. In front of Rizhao, Lu Yi had to think about how to fight for his own interests. Chailing Boundary's attitude had undoubtedly reassured him. Aunt Yu's words clearly told him that it did not matter whether the other party was Rizhao or not. The three-world island could do whatever they wanted. Zixian hated the three-world island to the core. But if they wanted to take back Zixian Island, they would have to abide by the rules of the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If an outsider like Rizhao dared to casually make a move in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, the 10,000 Elephant Sea would not tolerate it. I know what to do. Lu Yi nodded. That's good. Jiu Yan was undoubtedly very satisfied with his performance. There were many smart people in this world, but being smart and cautious was undoubtedly a good character. Such people generally did not die young. Chailing Boundary is not big, but the scenery is not bad. If you are not in a hurry to leave, you can stay in this boundary for a while, and let Shinnur entertain you. Seeing that Jiu Yan was about to leave, Lu Yi hurriedly said, Senior, I have one more thing to ask. What is it? Is there a female cultivator called Ban Ci in this boundary? Lu Yi asked. No. Jiu Yan shook her head, then asked, why are you looking for her? Lu Yi didn't know why he was looking for her. Speaking of which, he didn't have much contact with Han Ci. They only went to a secret place together, but something happened there. Since then, Han Ci hadn't been heard from since. If that was all, it would be fine. The woman had left after something like that. Lu Yi did not want to be entangled with her. The key was that when he came to Chailing Boundary last time, he saw a little girl called Ban Xia. That little girl's eyebrows and eyes were very similar to the little girl he had saved in a ruined boundary back then. Afterward, he learned from Chu Shun that Ban Xia was the child of a boundary and carried the destiny of a boundary. If he was not mistaken, Ban Xia should be the little girl he had saved back then. And Ban Xia and Ban Ci, there was a lot of room for imagination. In fact, when Ban Xia was saved back then, she was taken into a small world by Ban Ci. Now that Ban Xia was in Chailing Boundary, Lu Yi was very puzzled. It's nothing, Lu Yi replied in a muffled voice. Jiu Yan's interest was piqued. She asked, could it be that you've done something wrong to her? You've let her down again? No. Lu Yi hurriedly denied. Under the hazy halo, Jiu Yan looked deeply at Lu Yi. As a man, you have to be responsible. Being fickle and heartless is the most shameful thing. Take care of yourself. With that, he stood up and left. Lu Yi also stood up and bowed. He was speechless. Chapter 1876. Luan Xiao was about to step down from her position as the first island master, but she came to inform Lu Yi, the third island master. This would never happen on any other spiritual island. Senior martial sisters, what happened? Lu Yi's expression turned serious. To be honest, ever since the Three Realms cultivators came to the Wanxiang Sea, Luan Xiao had always been in charge. She had done a good job. Lu Yi was a little confused by her sudden appearance today. Yin Miao was the same. Luan Xiao looked at him and said, I'm going into seclusion for a while. I'm not sure how long it will take. The same goes for the first elder. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat. Realization dawned on him, and he looked delighted. Congratulations, senior sisters. Both Wan Xiao and Yin Miao were at the peak of the Yu Yao realm. If they were going into seclusion, there was only one thing they could do: break through the Yu Yao realm and ascend to sunshine. This was undoubtedly great news for the Three Realms Island. After so many years of nourishment from supreme-grade spirit-refining pills, were they finally going to bear fruit? If Wan Xiao could really take that step, then she would truly become the first sunshine cultivator in the Jade Conch galaxy. If Yin Miao ascended to sunshine, the significance would be equally great. For countless years, only the royal bloodline of the Merfolk tribe had a chance of ascending to sunshine. This was because of the bloodline curse. If Yin Miao succeeded, then the Merfolk tribe would also have their own sunshine. Their living conditions under the sea would be much better. However, it was not so easy to ascend from Yu Yao to sunshine. There were countless galaxies in the universe. Which one did not have their own Yu Yao? Although the number of Yu Yao in the cultivation world was not as large as the number of constellations, there were still many of them. However, there were not many sunshine cultivators. Senior sisters, have you suddenly sensed an opportunity? Lu Yi asked. Wan Xiao shook her head. Actually, the first elder and I sensed an opportunity 2 years ago. However, the Three Realms Island was not completely stable yet. We were worried. Things are different now. The purple jade has been broken. I'm sure no one will dare to cause trouble for the island. We can go into seclusion without worry. I see. Lu Yi understood. When do you plan to begin? As soon as possible. Wan Xiao replied, 5 Yueyao. After Grand Elder and I leave, the Merfolk clan will transfer 2nd Elder Yuxi and 4th Elder Qing Xian over to fill the vacancies. In the future, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Three World Island. There were a few newly ascended Yu Yao on the island, but because they had just ascended, their cultivation was still insufficient, making it difficult for them to take on important tasks. Thus, they still had to be transferred from the mermaid tribe. After all, if there really was a battle, the mermaid tribe wouldn't care whether you were a newly ascended Yu Yao or not. When it was time to kill, they wouldn't show any mercy. Sure. Lu Yi nodded repeatedly. He Baichuan's face appeared in his mind. Later on, he could hand over all matters of the Three-World Island to He Baichuan. With old Tang assisting from the side, it wouldn't be too bad. After discussing some details with Wan Xiao and Yin Miao, the two women left. They had to wait a few days for Yuxi and Qing Xian to come over from the mermaid tribe's territory. Then, they would make a trip to the island of versatility to change the information of the island's guardian, Yu Yao. Only then could Yuxi and Qing Xian be considered the guardians of the Three-Realm Island, Yu Yao. As for where Wan Xiao and Yin Miao would go into seclusion, what place in the world had better conditions than a spirit jade mine? Thus, the two women had to go to the mermaid tribe's territory. There was another advantage to doing this. Once they successfully ascended to the Sunshine Realm, no one would be alerted. If they were allowed to stay in seclusion on the Three-World Island, they wouldn't be able to hide the fact that they ascended to the Sunshine Realm. At that time, they wouldn't be able to stay on the island of versatility for long. Even if they didn't want to leave, they would have to leave. There was a precedent for this. Since ancient times, there had always been a few Yu Yao who ascended to the Sunshine Realm on the island of versatility. However, without exception, they could only stay for a short while before leaving. In the blink of an eye, the island's Yu Yao had 2 new guardians. The island master's ranking had also been changed. Lu Yi had become the first island master of the Three-World Island. This was indisputable. Even though the other Yu Yao were older than him in both cultivation and age, no one had any objections to him being the first island master. The Three-World Island was the most famous, and the strongest person on the island was the first island master. This was a deterrent to outsiders. When others mentioned the Three-World Island, they would think of the number 1 person under the Sunshine Realm. He Baichuan became the second island master, followed by Ma Shangxi, Yuxi, and Qing Xian. Perhaps because of the battle with Zixian, the Three-World Island had become more and more lively recently. The flow of customers had more than doubled. This made many shopkeepers rejoice that they had chosen to set up shop here in the first place. However, they were also a little worried, because they didn't know if the rent would increase in the future. Luan Xiaoa and Yin Miao went to the merfolk tribe's territory to cultivate in seclusion. Lu Yi also began his own seclusion. Speaking of which, he had long since planned to break through to the late stage Yu Yao. However, he had always been delayed by various things. Now that he had defeated Zixian, no one would come looking for trouble, right? He left his talent tree clone on the island, while his main body dove into the sea. He activated the talent tree's power and opened his mind to refine the seawater. Time passed. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, on the bustling island of the Three World, a young man with a dignified appearance strode through the spacious streets, and he sized up the surroundings with great interest. Soon, the young man arrived at a place. This was the boundary between the Three World Islands trade area and the island's cultivators' residential area. If he continued forward, he would arrive at the island's cultivators' residential area. Under normal circumstances, cultivators who came to the Three World Island to do business wouldn't come here. There were also cultivators from the Three World Island guarding this place. Seeing that the young man didn't change his direction and continued walking, a cultivator from the Three World Island immediately stepped forward and blocked his path. He raised his hand and gestured, "Halt. The area ahead is not open to outsiders. If you wish to buy or sell something, you may return." The young man clasped his hands behind his back and smiled calmly. "I'm not here to buy anything. I'm here to see your first island master." The cultivator blocking the way asked, "May I ask who you are? Why do you wish to see the first island master?" "There are indeed some matters I wish to discuss with him." The young man didn't answer directly. Instead, he took out a jade tablet and flicked it with a finger. "Please bring this to your first island master. He will naturally know." The cultivator took the jade tablet and glanced at it. He couldn't see anything special about it. He couldn't help but look at the young man in front of him. Only now did he realize to his surprise that he couldn't see through the young man's cultivation. This undoubtedly meant that the young man was most likely Yu Yao. Moreover, although the young man looked young, his bearing was extremely steady. The first impression he had was that he had a powerful background. Now that the Three World Islands' reputation had spread, many people naturally came to pay them a visit. However, most of the cultivators who came were looking for Tang Jun. By now, everyone knew that Tang Jun was the true representative of the Three World Island. Thus, if they truly wanted to cooperate with the Three World Island, he was the best choice. In the past, there had been people who had come to see Lu Yi, but after being turned down a few times, no one had come to see him again. "Please wait a moment," the cultivator from the Three World Island said, then immediately turned and left. Not long after, within Lu Ye's bamboo tower, the innate skill tree clone carefully examined the jade tablet. He raised an eyebrow. "A young man." The cultivator who came nodded. "He's very young." Of course, in the cultivation world, a youthful appearance didn't mean that one was truly young. It was possible that one was an old monster. The one who came this time was undoubtedly such an old monster. Moreover, he was a true old monster. That was because there was an extremely faint but extremely pure demonic aura lingering on the jade tablet. Lu Yi had a rough idea of the young man's background. "Invite him in," Lu Yi ordered. "Yes." After a while, the innate skill tree clone was waiting in front of the bamboo tower. When he saw the young man who came in with the disciple, his expression couldn't help but turn solemn. Ever since he returned from Che Ling realm that day, he had been waiting for this day to come. He had also imagined what kind of method Rizhao of Zixian would use if he really wanted to discuss the matter of Zixian Island with him. It was very likely that he would ask someone else to pass on the message, and then ask him to meet somewhere. However, Lu Yi had never expected that the young man would come over himself. For someone like Rizhao, this was undoubtedly a bit condescending. What was even more unexpected to Lu Yi was that the young man came over silently, without leaving any trace. Moreover, he even used the method of asking for an audience. It wasn't that Rizhao couldn't come to the Three World Island. With Rizhao's status, If he came to the island in a domineering manner, it would be normal for him to show off his supreme prestige as a deterrent. After all, everyone had a blood feud. There was no need to be so polite. This demon was not easy to deal with. This was Lu Ye's first impression of the young man when he saw him. Zixian's huge change didn't seem to affect him at all. Along the way, he didn't show any resentment or other emotions on his face. Instead, he looked around with interest. First Island Master. The three-world island cultivator, who led the way, came forward and cupped his fists. Lu Yi nodded and waved his hand, dismissing him. He looked straight at the young man who followed him. The young man also happened to look over. When their eyes met, the young man's clear eyes were like a deep pool. They were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. What made Lu Yi slightly puzzled was that he seemed to have seen this guy somewhere before. However, he couldn't remember at the moment. Three-world island Lu Yi. Lu Yi bowed first. Hey Yin. The young man nodded slightly and introduced himself. Lu Yi could not suppress the doubts in his heart and asked bluntly, "May I ask, Demon Venerable, have we met somewhere before?" On the Zixian demon planet, Yu Yao was the king, while Ri Zhao was the supreme. Demons like Lionheart and Hu Guang were all demon kings. He Yin was a demon venerable. This wasn't a division of strength, but a division of the demon race's status system. He Yin smiled and said, "Reincarnation tree, Alpha origin stage." Lu Yi was enlightened.